across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this Thursday. There's loads to discuss. The Homelessness Minister jacking up the rent for her tenants. She apparently stayed within the law, within the rules. Where have we heard that one before? Also, Labour's migrant deal already unravelling with more boats arriving, and ministers just don't seem to know what they're talking about when it comes to the one in, one out rules. It's not one in, one out actually, it's 17 in, one out because of the proportions with all of that. Bank of England cuts the interest rates to 4%. Is that going to help homeowners? What about people who are saving? We'll talk as well about wealthier areas facing big rises in council tax. So will the money you save actually just go out the door anyway? And does the taxman actually know what he's doing anyway? Because we're talking about their guilt at being British. Yes, really. There was a 1-hour session held under, guess what, Diversity, Equity and Inclusion to talk to people who work for Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs about the guilt of being British. What about the guilt of not answering the phone? What about the guilt of not helping small business owners in terms of paying their tax and getting their businesses moving? There's an awful lot within that. Also, the leader of a cash-strapped Labour council has awarded himself, guess what, a 33% pay rise. And we'll be finding out why Superman is now an immigration official. Not really Superman, the actor who played him, but nonetheless. Lots to discuss. I want to get your voice on the air. This is my show, but it's your show too. As always, I will take as many calls as I possibly can between now and 7 o'clock. Give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. That's the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note, less than a minute please. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring on the main number 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss between now and 7. We've got Reform UK Sarah Pochin coming up in just a second. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, one of the many ways that Labour's migrant deal is already unravelling is the fact that its own ministers don't seem to know what on earth is happening with it and how it works. The Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, has sparked fresh confusion by claiming migrants removed under the scheme could still have their human rights claims heard, but in France. She was asked about whether human rights claims presented a loophole. She said, that's not the case at all. The deal that we've struck will allow people with us to send people back to France who have human rights claims. Those claims will be heard in France. Except France actually won't participate in UK legal proceedings, so that's wrong. So she's the Culture Secretary, she's a member of the Cabinet, she's sent out in the media to defend this policy, and she apparently doesn't know what she's talking about. Well, Chris Philp is the Shadow Home Secretary, and yesterday he visited the English Channel to witness the migrant crisis with his own eyes. He spoke about the government not understanding their own deal. This is what he had to say.
Angela Rayner clearly doesn't understand the agreement that our own government have signed. And look, what is also clear is this agreement is having no deterrent effect whatsoever, because just today, boatfuls of migrants have crossed the Channel. I saw them leaving French waters, being picked up, and they're arriving behind us in the docks at Dover. So there is no deterrent effect whatsoever. Their deal isn't working.
The Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp. Well, Sarah Pochin is the Reform UK MP for Runcorn and Helsby. Sarah, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Peter, and thank you for having me on the show.
Always great to have you on. Tell me about this migration scheme. It seems that the government don't even know how it works themselves. If they don't know, how is it actually going to be effective?
It's very clear, isn't it, Peter, that the ministers and the people advising those ministers and the government generally really do not understand the policies that they are putting in front of the British people. And what that does, of course, means that the British people have no confidence in this government, or I should say the last Conservative government, to sort this problem out. The Labour Party is in absolute disarray. They don't understand what they're saying, which just proves that it's another ill-thought-through suggestion by this government on how to deal with this crisis.
How would Reform UK deal with it? Would they keep the one-in, one-out scheme? Would they reform it, scrap it? What would you do?
The one in, one out scheme is absolute nonsense. And in fact, I think makes us worse off because it's not one in, one out. It's, one out. And as you say, 17 at least in. We know that anyone that we accept in will be bringing endless extended family with them. We don't want this deal. It's not tackling the problem. We are facing on a good day now up to 1,000 illegal immigrants coming in across the channel. This one in, one out nonsense is nothing more than that. It's white noise, it's nonsense, it's doing nothing to solve what I now call is a national emergency. And to answer your question, Peter, reform will be really tough, as we've always said, on the channel. I mean, watching Chris Philps suddenly down on the, wherever he is down there on the cliffs of Dover suddenly, well, why weren't they doing anything when they were in power?
Well, in fairness, Sarah, you were a member of that party for a long time. I mean, you had your role to play
up until 2020, Peter. I left 5 years ago.
Okay.
And one of the reasons I left was because of policies that didn't come through, like leaving the European Court of Human Rights, for example. So just going back to answering your question, though, reform would get absolutely tough on anybody that sets foot on a beach in this country, gets swept up, deported, offshore, never sets foot in this country again legally. Okay, so that's quite clear. We patrol the channel with the Navy if necessary. Border Force are given proper instructions not to escort these people to our shores. We have to get tough. We have to turn those boats back. And as I say, anybody that does make it through to our shores gets immediately deported out of this country.
Economically, do you think it's good news, bad news that interest rates have been cut to 4%? Mortgage holders will certainly welcome it, but does it show that there is at least some movement in a positive direction in the economy? What's your evaluation of that, Sarah?
Well, look, the interest rates going down is an independent decision, as we know, by the Bank of England. The fact is, and of course, it makes mortgages cheaper for those that actually have a mortgage. But the fact is that this government has created an environment where getting on the housing ladder is almost impossible. It's punishing businesses. It's punishing people, workers that are trying to find jobs. The number of jobs available is going down month after month. So the environment of taxing businesses, increasing minimum wage, bringing in the Workers' Rights Bill makes less jobs available. If you don't have a job, what on earth is your chance of getting on the housing ladder? So I would say, look, again, yes, interest rates have gone down, but the overall economic environment that we find ourselves in under this Labour government is not one about growth. It's not one about pro-business. And those are the things that sustain the economy.
I want to ask you, just speaking about housing, about the homelessness minister. This is Rushanara Ali, who is a Labour MP. She owns property herself. She has kicked out the tenants and jacked up the rent so she can market it elsewhere. Now, she, of course, is in charge of policy for the Labour government in regard to this. She hasn't broken the rules in any way, but it smacks to me of hypocrisy. This is what the Conservative Party chairman, Kevin Hollingrake, has said earlier. He's called on the homelessness minister, Rushanara Ali, to resign.
I think it shows staggering hypocrisy. Rushanara Ali has been somebody who's obviously a government minister in charge of homelessness. She's spoken out about exploited tenants, about providing more protections for tenants. You can't say those things, then do the opposite in practice as a landlord. She's got to resign. I think as the law stands today, it was unethical, not illegal. But you can't just say one thing and do another. And that's what we see time and time again from some Labour ministers, saying one thing and doing another. So you're not bound by the law to follow it to the letter of the law. You can do the right thing by tenants, which most landlords in this country do. What Rushanara Ali has done, she's increased the rent deliberately by around 20%, by £700 a month. So that seemed extremely unfair. The tenant wanted another tenancy, and that could have been assessed by an independent tribunal, but no, she decided to kick these tenants out, 4 tenants, and put new people in so she could have more money.
That is Kevin Hollingreich there, the chairman of the Conservative Party, slamming the homelessness minister Rushanara Ali. She threw people out of living in her East London property and later relisted it for hundreds of pounds more. She also told tenants that they'd be charged £2,400 for the house to be repainted and professionally cleaned. I mean, I'll do it for half of that. Sarah, what do you make of this story?
What an absolute disgrace. I don't often agree with the Conservative Party, but what Kevin was saying there, he used the words hypocritical. You know, absolutely, it is a disgrace. She is the minister, and what she's done, she's making the most. She's lining her own pockets with her own policies. I would like to know, Peter, whether or not that house that she has turfed her tenants out of and increased the rent, has that gone to one of the houses of multiple occupancy? Is that now full of asylum seekers? Let's ask some of these difficult questions, because we know, don't we, that the government itself, through the likes of Serco, are paying these higher rents and causing people like my residents here in Runcorn and Helsby not to be able to get on the housing ladder for rented accommodation. They're now being priced out of the market by increased rents by providers like Serco, who are sweeping up, cleaning up rented properties on the market, and they're no longer available for British tenants. So I'd love to know a bit more about the background to this story. But look, it's just another example of politicians being hypocritical and lacking integrity. Before her, there was Tulip. What was the name?
Tulip Sadiq.
Thank you. Well, thank you. I know.
She was the anti-corruption minister who is facing allegations of corruption. Well, she's facing allegations of corruption.
I beg your pardon. Yeah, facing allegations of corruption. But again, you know, it's these sort of politicians that give politicians a bad name, and it's people like myself with integrity standing up as a strong voice for the public are the reason why Reform Now is so popular as a party.
Sarah,
to vote
you
for.
said you agreed with Kevin Hollingreich there. I said you don't always agree with the Conservatives. What about what Chris Philp is now saying, the Shadow Home Secretary, on ID cards? What do you feel about ID cards, digital ID cards? Is that something that Reform UK would support?
Well, look, I personally don't have a problem with an ID card. You know, I don't see what the issue is. Most of our information now is on our smartphones anyway.
Can we trust the system, though?
Well, what more? How much more could we be at risk? As I say, all of our information is out there in a cloud, in the ether, whatever you want to call it. It's all available, isn't it? We can all be tracked now if somebody wants to track us. Oh, apart from illegal asylum seekers coming in.
Your party leader, Nigel Farage, says he's against them. So you're for them, but he's against them.
Look, I'm just saying that personally, I don't have a problem with it.
What's the Reform Party policy on it? Your leader seems to be saying one thing, you seem to be saying something else, Sarah.
I don't think we have a clear policy at the moment. If we do, then I don't know what it is. You know, but the point is I'm giving you my opinion.
Sure.
Nigel might have a different opinion, and when I chat to him next, I'll bring it up and see what the right thing to, you know, not what we are saying.
Sure.
But I'm just giving you my opinion.
Yep.
I don't have a problem with it. I think it's got to come. And what I would say about ID cards is it will identify people that are coming in illegally, and if we took their DNA and if we did the facial recognition at places like Marston, the place in Kent where they all pass through, then we'd have a much better track on people in the community being dispersed through houses of multiple occupation, such that when crimes are committed, sexual attacks on women take place, we can track down these individuals. So, you know what, personally, I don't have a problem with it.
OK. Sarah, thank you very much. That's Sarah Pochin there, who is the Reform UK MP for Runcorn and Helsby. Thank you to Tad in Cambridge, who says, "Afternoon, Peter. Does anyone really know definitively just how far the woke disease is permeated through society, and is there an effective antidote for it? Common sense, it seems, is in very short supply. Of woke lunacy has even poisoned institutions like HMRC." Well, we'll be talking about this a little bit later on. This is the front page of the Daily Mail today, talking about HMRC, the fact that there is a workshop, a 1-hour workshop on feeling guilt about being British. Speaking of HMRC, it is, of course, His Majesty's Revenue and Customs, not Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. Thank you to Nevin in London, who pointed that out. Also, Peter in Worthing, who says, "Let me clarify the confusion of the latest migrant initiative from Labour. It's lots in, none out. I hope you find this helpful." Stephen Millings in Belfast says, "On ID cards, I already have a passport, driving licence, bus pass, all on government databases. As long as it was a proper card, I wouldn't mind. If it's a phone-based ID app, then they can stuff it." What do you think about ID cards? cards? Are you worried about it? Do they just have our ID already? I remember this was a very, very big debate under Tony Blair. He wanted ID cards. Lots of people said no. Let's speak to Graham in Kent about interest rates. They're down to 4% now. This is the second successive cut, I think, since second successive cut. I should say it's done it's revisited every month. Graham, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Peter, I need your advice, really, and I'm scandalised.
Oh dear, I hope it's not anything financial.
Well, let's see. Let's go with it. I think that it's great for homeowners, and I understand that. But it seems to me the IMF has been talking about the Bank of England lowering interest rates because of our debt. And it seems to me, I think Gordon Brown set this independence, the Bank of England, up. It seems to me that the Bank of England is being politicised now.
Well, they would say they're totally independent. It's their fifth cut since last August. It passed on a knife edge. It takes the cost of borrowing to the lowest level for more than 2 years. But if you look at those gilt rates, if you look at how much the cost of government debt is, it's actually up to the same level, if not higher, than it was under Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng.
That certainly is. And, for her to claim, for Rachel Reeves to claim this is some sort of victory, I don't believe it is at all. I think it's reflecting the state of the economy that's going bad. And,
Well, I think you're right, actually. And what always seems to be the case, Graham, and this happens, I interviewed Steve Reid, the Environment Secretary, a couple of weeks ago, and he said, we've cut interest rates again. They haven't. And actually, Jane, one of our listeners, got in touch to say, can you just clarify this point? And the point is that the Bank of England is independent of government. Gordon Brown did that as one of the first things he did. Wasn't in the Labour manifesto in 1997, but they did that. It's up to them, and the government cannot claim credit if interest rates go down or up or whatever they want to do, and they can't say that it's not their fault because it's supposedly nothing to do with them. It's meant to be independent, Graham.
I'm very worried about the politicisation of the Bank of England now. I think they're taking another step towards where they shouldn't be. The Bank of England regulates the interest rates. That's what it was set up for. And really, it's a bit of a cheek that Starmer and Reeves are claiming, this is the great shape of the economy. Okay,
well, indeed, Graham, thanks for your thoughts there. I appreciate that. Jerry in Newcastle has also given me a ring in 0344 499 1000. Jerry, you've some thoughts on digital ID. What would you like to say?
I just thought your interview with Sarah Fortune there was just absolute classic. You literally just ripped her apart.
Did I?
Asking her a few simple questions.
Well, she didn't seem to know what her policy was on ID cards. She said what I think personally, which is fine.
It was unbelievable, Peter. Unbelievable. How contradictory.
Well, what do you think, Jerry? What's your thought on ID cards? Would you carry one?
Well, no, certainly not. Why should I? I know who I am.
Well, you know who you are, Jerry. But a lot of people say, look, we've got all these different things. We've got passports, driving license. You can barely log into your email at work without a digital ID.
Yeah. Exactly. Look, Peter, the main reason I'm ringing up is because of this immigration crisis. Nobody has talked about what Gaddafi predicted before he died in 2010. He predicted that 5 This is now happening. Why aren't people waking up to that fact now?
Well, listen, I mean, I think it's really interesting to look back to those historical comparisons, and certainly a lot of people feel that there has been some sort of invasion. Jerry, I appreciate you getting in touch on 0344 499 1000. You can do the same thing. I'll tell you what's coming up next, but I can't actually find my running order. Here it is. It's under some papers here. We're going to talk to John Redwood in a second, Sir John Redwood, about all this economic change. Also, the HMRC story about the taxman's guilt at being British. Do you feel guilty about being British? I don't. I feel proud of it. Let me know your thoughts on all of that. Stay with us here on Talk.
think that you're, in a way, you're using the men, not them using you?
I mean, I always say, like, to the men, look, honestly, use me, rearrange my insides and all of that.
Yeah,
but
every time you say that phrase, I kind of recoil. Why?
Yeah.
What does that, what, I mean...
It's just like...
You're basically saying, I mean, you say to men, and you've said in videos, you know, strangle me, you know, slap me, spit on me.
God, you sound like you're about to start one of my videos.
Yeah, I don't think I'd be making the same money as you.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
So you might not think that being hit with a water pistol is really that serious, but actually it can be, because it's not going to cause you any long-term damage. Usually you might get a bit wet. But why are people firing water pistols? Well, we've seen footage online from Farnworth in Bolton, and 2 men have been arrested for this video, which we're playing on the screen now, which shows a man who is spraying a water pistol specifically at people who are visibly Jewish. This is people who have, I'm thinking it's hilarious that they're doing so. His mate in the car thinks it's really funny. There are people who are visibly Jewish. They're wearing some of the garb that some Orthodox Jewish people do. They think it's really funny. 2 men have been arrested today because of this in Farnworth and Bolton after a video widely shared online. I saw it yesterday. We talked about it in the programme very briefly. Now 2 men have been arrested. It appears to show occupants of a vehicle spraying water specifically at members of the Jewish community. 2 men aged 26 and 36 remain in custody for questioning on suspicion of racially aggravated common assault. And as part of the investigation, officers have seized a vehicle believed to be the one used in the footage. Chief Inspector Simon Ashcroft of Greater Manchester Police's Salford District said, "We're treating this incident with the utmost seriousness and have acted swiftly to make arrests. Greater Manchester Police has a zero-tolerance approach to hate crime in any form, and we're committed to ensuring our communities feel safe and supported. We continue to work closely with our partners to provide reassurance and encourage anyone affected to come forward. We're also aware from other footage that there may be further victims. We urge anyone who believes they have been targeted to contact Greater Manchester Police or the Community Security Trust." The Community Security Trust, of course, does a fantastic job keeping tabs on anti-Semitism, which has rocketed, and indeed rocketed, after that absolute scumbag Pascal Robinson-Foster of Bob Villan shouted "death, death to the IDF," something for which he has not even been spoken to by police, as far as we know so far. Certainly hasn't been arrested or charged. Sir John Redwood is with us. We're going to talk about all the economics aspects of the day with the former Conservative Cabinet Minister. But John, maybe I could get your thoughts first of all on these arrests.
Well, I'm delighted the police are taking it seriously, and they need to find out what these people thought they were doing, because it looks very bad. And I think the police are right that you have to nip this kind of thing in the bud in case it escalates, because we don't want race and hate crimes on our streets.
John, thanks for that. Let's talk about the interest rate cut to 4%. This is something which is actually the 5th cut since last August. What do you make of it, and who is it good news for and who is it bad news for? Because, of course, the government says it's all marvellous and they're brilliant. Well,
it's a little bit of good news for people who are borrowing on variable rates, but a lot of people have fixed rates. It's pretty bad news elsewhere. I mean, it's bad for the government, because the only reason they cut the rate, with inflation still rising, was they think we're going to go into recession or into a very bad slowdown from what little growth we've got. And it's once again a sign that the Bank of England itself doesn't really know what it's doing. They were pointing in 3 different directions and 3 different factions wanting different outcomes. And the thing that really annoyed me about the bank is this bank, who is losing us billions of pounds on the bonds it bought at wrong prices, and has now, for some unknown reason, decided to sell a load of them at a loss, didn't even bother to comment on that. And they're sending we, the taxpayers, bills for billions every time they go out and sell a load of these bonds.
Can I ask you just to clarify, we had a viewer who got in touch, Jane, who said, what is the position of the Bank of England? I mean, it's independent of government, that's what Gordon Brown did, but can you just give us your thoughts on whether the bank is totally independent or whether it's been politicised in any way?
Well, it was always highly political, and Gordon Brown didn't really change that very much. He gave it one very important independent power for the first time, the power to set the short-term interest rate, the base rate that we've been talking about now. But he took a lot of their other powers away. And of course, it's 100% owned by the state. It answers to the Treasury. The boss of the Bank of England is appointed on the advice of the Chancellor and the Prime Minister to Parliament. And Parliament calls the governor in from time to time to cross-examine him about what the bank is doing. So this is a creature of the state with one important independent power, which hasn't been challenged by any of the major parties since it was granted by Gordon Brown. But we do need to probe how it uses and abuses its other powers, because the bank has made some disastrously bad decisions this decade, creating too much money, buying bonds that were very expensive, and now, unlike all the other central banks that made similar mistakes, dumping them at losses prematurely and sending the bill to the taxpayer. Now, I think that needs to be properly investigated, and it's quite proper for the government to investigate that, because they, the government, on our behalf, are guaranteeing the bank against all losses, and it's messing up their accounts by having to send all this money to the bank every time they lose money.
Let's see what the Prime Minister has been saying in the last 24 hours about the state of the economy.
Some of the figures that have been put out are not figures that I recognise, but the budget won't be until later in the year, and that's why we'll have the forecast then, and we'll set out our plans. What's really important is that I'm very clear about our focus, which will be on living standards and making sure that people feel better off, partly because more money is coming into their pocket in the first place through better wages, and partly because we're bearing down on costs like mortgages and other costs to everyday families.
Well, that is the Prime Minister speaking there. Do you think tax rises are inevitable in the autumn time, Sir John?
No, they're neither inevitable nor desirable. They would make the situation worse. She tried this last time round. She said there was a big black hole in the finances, which she claimed the previous government was responsible for. Indeed, a little over half of it was her decisions that have put spending up, and decided to fill that, she thought, with tax rises, and said that would be a one-off and she wouldn't have to do it again. And now she's got a new black hole entirely of her making, more than twice the size of the one she claimed to have inherited. And if she now puts a whole load more tax rises onto individuals and companies, far from bringing the deficit down, it will make things worse, because people have less money to spend. Companies will be cutting back further on how many people they can afford to employ. There'll be fewer transactions in the economy, and other types of tax collection like VAT will be hit. So I would urge her not to do that. The only way out of this is to control her spending better. And she's spending too much and she's borrowing too much. And they sort of know it, because they say they see the civil service is too big and not very productive. They see that the benefits bill is out of control. They should understand that every time they decide to give a whole load of money away to Mauritius on the Chagos and needless self-harm, or to the EU to try and get a reset, that's money we can't afford and money we have to borrow. And then there are the massive bills for their extreme version of net zero. Another 650 million announced last week as subsidies for battery cars. Well, we can't afford that kind of thing. Get real, government, and then you might start to get a growing economy and you wouldn't need to put the taxes up.
Speaking of getting real, the Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp has opened the door, from a Conservative policy perspective anyway, to perhaps agree with the government that digital IDs are needed. What's your view on this, Sir John?
Well, it only went quite that far. He said that any serious party needed to study it. I don't mind them studying it. But what I said to them is they've got a system of ID at the moment related to work called national insurance numbers, and they need to enforce that properly. That system doesn't work very well because they're too casual about it. They need to make sure that everybody has a unique national insurance number that is enabled to work, and they should enforce more strongly the rule that an employer can't employ an illegal migrant, for example, because they don't have a national insurance number. And why don't they get on and sort that system out? And that can be electronic. You and I have to often supply our national insurance number electronically to undertake various transactions.
It's very true. Sir John, thank you for joining us today. That's Sir John Redwood, the former Conservative Cabinet Minister. Elaine in Derbyshire has some thoughts on digital ID. Elaine, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
I think we all know how this is going to be used. The only point of having this is if you say to migrants, if you don't have it, you're going to be denied,
services, public services.
Services.
Yeah.
And they're not going to do that. So what's the point in having it?
Well,
so
that system, which I think is a system that would work, then means that all of us have to prove our identity as well. So anytime you went into a hospital, for example, you would have to say, here's my digital ID, I'm a British citizen, I'm here legally, etc. And that puts an incumbent, it's incumbent upon us, Elaine, isn't it?
But Peter, then they would have to deny the migrants public recourse, and they're not going to do that.
Yep.
They can do that now, and they're not going to do that.
That's a very good point.
You have to have a passport to get housing,
yep.
And these people are still being put up in hotels.
Yeah.
So I don't understand. To me, it's a grift, just like the online safety bill, to have tighter control over us. Because, like I say, you have to have a birth certificate, for example, to get into a British school. And there are children who don't have British birth certificates who are in British schools.
Yeah.
So the idea that they're going to turn away migrants from the hospital or from the GPs or from the schools or from housing is laughable.
Well, that's a really good point, Elaine. And the point of all of this that you've raised very, very well is actually it's not just about a piece of card or a plastic card or even a digital piece of ID on your phone or whatever. It's actually what are you going to have access to and not have access to? And that's the bigger issue here, isn't it?
Yeah, and this is what they're not answering because, like I said, they're already not supposed to have access to public recourse. And can I just say, for example, a lot of people won't know this, in the summer holidays, migrants' children have access to summer holiday clubs by half vouchers. There are lots of parents who can't afford summer holiday clubs for their children, and they're not supposed to have access to public recourse.
And one of the things, Elaine, we've been exposing on this show and on this station have been all the things that many migrants are getting half-price access to, asylum seekers, to leisure centres, to fireworks displays, to all sorts of council-related things, and it's just not fair. Elaine, really good points there. Thank you for your call. We're going to take a break now, and in a second we're going to turn to America. Michael Graham, not that Mike Graham, another Michael Graham is going to talk to us, the managing editor of Inside Sources. Could Trump meet Putin as early as next week? Could there be some end in sight for the Ukraine war? Let's stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to everybody on Twitter. Dead as a Dodo says, you and I have a national insurance and NHS number. Both were originally backed up by a card. Migrants get jobs and healthcare without these numbers or cards. Why would a digital ID, which will also need a paper backup version, make any difference? Angela says, if we had ID cards during the pandemic, I would probably have been stopped via my bank account from going out as I refused the vaccine. I'm worried the government would overstep the mark, but there is an issue with illegal migrants, so I'm 50-50. Reform can't answer all policies all the time. Please give them a break, says Angela. Well, I think it's quite reasonable for me to ask Sarah Puchin, what is your policy? What do you think about ID cards? It is a big issue in the media today, just as I would ask any other politician. And, you know, she differs from Nigel Farage. Maybe she'll change her mind. Maybe Reform will come up with a policy on that. Maybe they don't have a policy on everything. That's fair enough. She was very honest and straightforward and said it. And that's kind of what I like about Sarah Puchin, and that if she doesn't know something, she'll just tell you. Thank you to Jason Flynn in Southampton, who says, well done, Greater Manchester Police. Anti-Semitism instantly stamped upon. Shame on Avon and Somerset Police allowing that scumbag Bob Villan, it's Pascal Robinson Foster from Bob Villan, to carry on to freely walk our streets uncharged. Disgraceful, says Jason. Well, we will keep a very, very close eye on what happens then. I want to talk about America now because there is the possibility of a meeting, possibly even a three-way meeting between Donald Trump, Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin. This is what Donald Trump said about a possible meeting with Putin.
There's a very good prospect that they will, and we haven't determined where, but we had some very good talks with President Putin today, and there's a very good chance that we could be ending the round, ending the end of that road. That road was long and continues to be long, but there's a good chance that there will be a meeting very soon.
So that could be as early as next week. We will see what happens there. Michael Graham is a US political commentator and managing editor of Inside Sources. Michael, do you think this meeting will happen, and what will they be talking about, and what will come out of it, do you think?
Well, did you notice how Donald Trump stumbled as he started to describe what was going to be the outcome? He wants to say we could end the war, like he was saying when he ran for president. I'll end it in the first day, because I think he really thought that Vladimir Putin would take a deal. And he was prepared to basically throw half of Ukraine under the bus to get the deal. And now it's become clear, I think, based on his public statements, that he believes that that's not true, that Vladimir Putin is not going to stop, that he's going to have to be stopped. And that's why he stumbled when he's talking about what is the goal of this meeting, and he didn't have his usual up-tempo conversation.
And actually, the deadline is meant to be tomorrow as well, before huge and crushing sanctions are brought in against the Russians. Doesn't look as if that's going to happen.
I can't mock the sanctions, because today President Trump imposed a 50% tariff on India over their continued use of Russian oil, and that's the kind of sanction that can start to bite if you close off the valves, to continue the oil metaphor, and sink all of his tankers as they head out, metaphorically speaking. Then that's a real problem. So I think Trump will take a meeting, and I think Putin will want a meeting in order to let him continue to bomb Ukraine. That's the goal, it looks like, from over here. The question is the meeting the last line for Trump, in which he basically says, look, either you give me something out of this meeting, or we're going to use all of the tools other than direct military action against you. And that could cause real problems for Putin.
Yes, on the minor prospect of a potential World War III. Trump has announced yet more...
I want to back up on that. Why is there more of a potential World War III today than 6 months ago, 6 years ago? I mean,
it's a very good point.
But Putin's had the nukes the whole time. And this notion that, oh my gosh, if we give the Ukrainians mean weapons, they're going to go nuclear. Guys, the downside of going nuclear hasn't changed. The first country to go nuclear will instantly become an international pariah. I'll put it this way. Putin going nuclear means no more Putin. His regime will be over, because the whole world, everybody, Belarus will turn on Putin.
Belarus will never turn on Putin. Come on, Michael.
No, that's how bad it will be to be the first country to use nukes in the modern era. There is zero tolerance from anybody in the world, including China, which would then be on the border of a country that chose to use nukes. However mild they can use, tactical, it doesn't matter. If they use anything bigger than a microwave, that's it. International pariah. That's the real outcome. And the rest of the world, the West, the UK, Europe, the US, should be treating it that way. It's just not a realistic threat unless you're prepared to commit suicide for your regime.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about the former Superman actor Dean Cain. He has emerged. He's been a sort of anti-woke hero for a lot of people. He's now joining the immigration enforcement and has done a little video for them.
So I don't know how it works in the UK, but in America, the left has all the TV stars and movie stars, and you know,
largely the same here. Yeah.
And the right has, you know, like the guy who played Fraser Crane on Cheers. I mean, it's like, you know, so they're very shallow pool of celebrities. So is Dean Cain still a celebrity? I mean, his TV show was a hit back in the 90s. He's done some movies. Actually, I don't mean to mock the guy. He's an athlete who had been picked up by the pros for real football, not your fake kickball thing.
How dare you? How dare you, Michael?
And he got injured his first year, so before he started his career. And his mom was in the entertainment business. And he kind of fell into it, and actually he's done some good work. So good for him. But the idea that he's like a big time celebrity. Here's what's interesting. He's already a sworn law enforcement officer. He's like a backup cop in some community out in Idaho where he owns a house or something. So he's already there. Now, I'd like to completely end this conversation and ask you about the benefits for illegal immigrants in the UK and the conversation you were just having before I came on. Because here's what I find interesting about it from our side. In the US, the real issue we have is that we don't trust the enforcers. And so when someone says, do a digital ID, do a paper ID, you know, prove your identity, whatever, many Americans believe it doesn't matter what you do, as you were saying right before I came on. It doesn't matter what kind of press. If the people who are in the process of enforcement, or if they aren't interested in doing the job. When President Biden was president, they knew these people were illegal. They wanted them in. Biden sent planes to carry them in. When it comes to benefits like our social benefits, we know that the people who work in the offices are helping illegal immigrants navigate the system. It's not that these people come from wherever it is, you know, Belarus again, or Mexico, and they are secret, you know, scandal. You know, I know the tricks. No, they're walking in going, is there help here? And the advocates for illegal migration are saying, yes, I'll find a way to get you help. And as long as the average Briton and the average American doesn't believe that the people who are in charge of our money are trying to protect us from scams, and in fact, many of the government workers are actively involved in the scams, they're never going to support this. Why would you change anything?
Okay. Michael Graham, thank you as political commentator and managing editor of Inside Sources. I appreciate you joining us on Talk Drive this afternoon. We've got some breaking news now on the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has said that his country intends to take military control of all of Gaza and will eventually hand it over to armed forces that will govern it properly. Let's take a look at what he has said to Fox News.
Israel will take control of all of Gaza.
We intend to, in order to assure our security, remove Hamas there, enable the population to be free of Gaza, and to pass it to civilian governance. That is not Hamas and not anyone advocating the destruction of Israel. That's what we want to do. We want to liberate ourselves and liberate the people of Gaza from the...
That's Benjamin Netanyahu there saying with an interview on Fox News that we intend to, when asked if Israel would take control of the entire 26-mile strip of Gaza. He said we don't want to keep it, we want to have a security perimeter, we don't want to govern it, we don't want to be there as a governing body. So the idea is that this would be, at the moment, Israel has control of about 65 to 70% of Gaza. They want to take control of the whole thing, completely eradicate Hamas, govern it for as long as it needs to, and then have a civilian body governing Gaza. That'll be very interesting to see what the UK government says about that. There's about 75% of the Israeli population that wants the war to end. Certainly if you want to take control, if Netanyahu wants to take control of the whole of the strip, well, that would mean an escalation in the war. It would also mean that there would be an elongation of the war. It would be longer. It'll be very interesting to see what happens there and what the international reaction will be, especially as Israel is so isolated in so many different ways. Clearly, Netanyahu, his stated aim was to destroy Hamas. There'll be outrage, of course, on the left. They will say this is terrible and that the war should end, and that's fine. And I want the war to end, and I want there to be a peaceful Gaza. But Netanyahu's thought on this will be that can only happen when Hamas is completely eradicated, and his plan for that anyway is to take complete control of the 26-mile Gaza Strip. Very, very interesting. Big development there, and we'll bring you more on that later on in the programme. We'll talk in just a second as well about a talk exclusive about a prison in panic. Brixton jail on a 2-week lockdown after a blundering guard takes his keys home for 6 days. Seriously? That's pretty basic. Stay with us here on Talk.
You think that you're, in a way, you're using the men, not them using you?
I mean, I always say, like, to the men, look, honestly, use me, rearrange my insides and all of that.
Yeah, every time you say that phrase, I kind of recoil. Why?
Yeah.
What does that, I mean...
It's just like...
You're basically saying, I mean, you say to men, and you've said in videos, you know, strangle me, you know, slap me, spit on me.
God, you sound like you're about to start one of my videos.
Yeah, I don't think I'd be making the same money as you.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to the texter who says, "Hi Peter, did you know that this current deal with France is only for 11 months and then it's renegotiated again after 11 months? Yeah, I did know that. Can you believe how many people will be coming over and how much this is costing us for just 11 months? Another person, Joel, says the point of the digital ID is that it is a precursor and a prerequisite to a digital currency. This has been the whole goal of unfettered illegal immigration. Titus on Twitter says, I already have several forms of official photo ID in my wallet. I have absolutely no issue with another, although although the sensible thing to do would be to bring them all together in a single entity. Quite a lot of reaction to what Sarah Pochin said earlier on today. Mark says, reform or a clown show, no joined up position on anything, stepping in self-made holes constantly, and above all else lying to its voters on what they're going to get with them. Another person says, I have a passport and a driving licence. I don't need one, thank you. On the cost of living, Alexander says, I went in to buy 4 beef burgers the other day at my local Asda. They jumped from $3.50 to $5.25. Cat food up from $4.47 to $6.30. A jar of Nescafe coffee from $3.60 to $7.20. This is unacceptable, and a lot of people just cannot afford to shop. Keep your messages coming in, 87222 with the word talk in your text, or send me a WhatsApp on 0344 499 1000. You can send me a voice note on that as well. Keep them to less than a minute, please. I want to talk about this talk exclusive about prison bosses forced to throw His Majesty's prison Brixton into a 2-week lockdown after a hapless guard took a set of keys home and didn't return them for 6 days. This is all inmates of the Category C prison in South London confined to their cells as panicked officers scrambled to change the locks on every door following the major breach. The officer responsible is believed to have been suspended, but questions remain about how he managed to get the keys out of the facility and whether copies could have been made. A prison source has told Talk the guard realised he'd taken the keys home but seemed to panic and keep hold of them for 6 days. No one knows how he got the keys out, but now the prison is spending millions of pounds changing every lock. Let's talk to Mark Hammersley. He's a retired prison governor. He used to actually work at His Majesty's prison Brixton. Mark, this is seriously bad, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. It is luckily a rare occurrence. It doesn't have to happen very often, but when it does, it is a serious breach of security, and it's very, very expensive to put right. And of course, the ultimate, the worst case scenario that could have happened if keys have gone out of jail is, as you said, they could have been copied, and they could be in the hands of the wrong people. And of course, when keys do go out of the jail, the longer they're out of the jail, the more of a concern it is. So that there are mistakes that happen and things do go wrong sometimes, but more often than not, their return, if a key does get taken out of the jail by mistake, it's returned very, very quickly, sometimes within minutes.
What's the system, Mark, that you worked on then? Presumably they had to be sort of signed in and signed out when you had these keys?
Yeah, the system sort of has changed over the years. It used to be very much a manual system where staff came in and they swapped keys physically. Each member of staff a set of keys, and each member of staff swapped the keys for a tally, and you swapped your tally and keys when you came in and swapped your tally and keys when you came out. But systems were brought in years ago to save staff, and in theory to improve security, so that we have machines now that are biometrically controlled, so staff draw their keys using their biometric fingerprints to draw keys, and put keys away the same way. And when you go out the jail, again, it's out with biometrics, and the computer system checks your biometrics so that if you have still got keys out, it won't let you out the jail.
Yeah, it didn't seem to flag it for 6 days in this case. Have you ever forgotten? Have you ever forgotten yourself, or know anybody who's forgotten and brought keys out by mistake?
It certainly does happen, Peter. Yeah, but say in my experience, when it has happened, and there are areas where it can happen, they're normally found pretty quickly, within minutes or within hours. And when they are found and discovered, we get the keys back immediately, and we try to get eyes on those keys for the times they've been out of the jail. Do you know what I mean? So if they've been out just for 5 minutes and it was the officer just going to his car, then suddenly realising coming back again, we've got that 5 minutes on a CCTV, if you like, so
yes,
we can be
sure you can account for all of it. But 6 days,
Absolutely.
6 days is huge, isn't it? A lot of things
Absolutely.
could have hypothetically happened during that time, and it doesn't really bear thinking about if a criminal gang had got hold of those keys, if they'd released all the prisoners, or many of the prisoners could have been released in theory as a result of it. So we've seen that the prison officer, the guard himself, he'd realised he'd taken the keys home, apparently panicking, and kept them for 6 days. What should happen now? He's been suspended. Surely that's a sackable offence.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to prejudge the investigation.
Sure, of course.
That will look into exactly what did and didn't happen. But certainly, if a member of staff knows they've got a set of keys at home, it is their and they find out they've got their keys, it is their responsibility to return them immediately. And if they were taken out accidentally, as soon as they discover that they've got the keys, they need to bring them back. But there's also systems in the prison. There's checks that should have been done routinely to identify any missing keys within very much shorter time scales than days.
Than 6 days anyway, yeah.
Absolutely. Within 12, 24 hours, the prison itself should have realised that the systems were in place.
So you think you think in theory, I mean, I know you don't know every detail of this, but it looks to you as if there could have been not just a prison officer making a mistake here, but actually a systematic error as well.
I think so. It sounds like there's issues that need investigating. A, concerning the member of staff who took the keys home. B, the staff that let the member of staff out with keys. C, the system that allowed that member of staff to leave without it. D, the management checks in place that should have identified this on the day when they're doing their management checks to do those things. And of course, if the prison officer had realised before 6 days were up that he'd got the keys and hadn't brought him up, that's another thing that obviously seriously needs to be investigated. Why would anyone do that?
Well, exactly. What are their motivations? Mark, listen, thanks for your thoughts on this. Mark Hammersley is a retired prison governor. He used to work at His Majesty's Prison Brixton himself, actually, and a prison service spokesman said extra security measures have been put in place following the key loss at His Majesty's Prison Brixton. The incident is being investigated, but the security of the prison has not been compromised and there's no risk to the public. Thank you to Stephen. He says, make sure you don't accidentally take your earphones home. Talk may have to close them down tomorrow. Well, actually, this one was made for my ear, so I do take it home. And Leslie says, if Netanyahu carries out his plan, will Egypt allow refugees from Gaza until Netanyahu succeeds? We'll be talking about that in a second. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening, this is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. Loads to talk about between now and 7, including that breaking news from the Middle East. The Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, says he wants to take over all of Gaza. He wants to completely eradicate Hamas and then set up a civilian government in Gaza. That's major breaking news. We'll return to that in just a few minutes' time. We'll also talk about news closer to home about the one in, one out scheme. It's not one in, one out, it's 17 in, one out. That is apparently fraying at the seams already. The Culture Secretary, Lisa Nanny, doesn't seem to know how it actually works. We've also had a interest rate cut to 4%. That'll help people with mortgages anyway. And digital IDs, what do you think? Loads of people getting in touch about this actually. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. The Conservatives have opened the door to them. Labour appear to want them to happen. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute please. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring on the main number 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss here on Talk. Stay with me between now and 7. Well, let's talk about that migration plan, because the Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp was talking about this. He went to Dover yesterday. He actually went out in the English Channel to have a look at what was going on there. Will the scheme work? This is what he thinks.
Angela Rayner clearly doesn't understand the agreement that our own government have signed. And look, what is also clear is this agreement is having no deterrent effect whatsoever, because just today, boatfuls of migrants have crossed the Channel. I saw them leaving French waters, being picked up, and they're arriving behind us in the docks at Dover. So there is no deterrent effect whatsoever. Their deal isn't working.
Ivan Sampson is with us, who's an immigration lawyer. Ivan, thank you for joining us today. I wonder if you think this scheme will work, or whether, under current human rights legislation, whether anybody, or a lot of people perhaps, who are taken into this scheme from the UK's perspective, we're told that people have been lifted already, can simply say this is a breach of my human rights.
Well, we won't know if it'll work till June next year, when they'll consider the data and see whether.
We'll know if people are sent to France, won't we?
Well, this is the thing. Yvette Cooper didn't actually say how many she's going to send. The test will be the very first one, and there are logistical and legal challenges that the government could face. And it's not just human rights. What this one in, one out policy says is, if you come across on a boat to claim asylum, you're deemed to be inadmissible. And what that means is you can't claim asylum. So the Refugee Convention prohibits that. Furthermore, the Refugee Convention doesn't require anyone to have legal right to enter a country. They're not illegal entrants, they're irregular entrants. So I think there's going to be some challenging on those 2 points. Regarding human rights, I mean, people may rely on Article 3 and Article 2, which is the right to...
Of the European Convention on Human Rights.
European Convention, not to face inhumane integrating treatment. So there's also the actual...
Why would it be inhumane or degrading treatment to be sent to France?
Well, you go sent to France, but then they may well go from there somewhere else back to their own country. So you asked me, can people raise that point?
Sure.
They can. Whether that's going to fly with the courts, that's another matter. There's also the administrative steps of removal. We don't know what they are. So they themselves might be under a legal challenge. We'll have to wait and see what those steps are. But really, I think the reason Yvette Cooper hasn't given numbers, because they understand that they may well face challenges in the courts. So it's the first one. Remember the first Rwanda flight? It never got
off the ground. Do you think this will go the same way, Ivan? I mean, how likely do you think it is that migrants who come here on boats will actually be sent to France, any of them?
Look, I think the UK will need to make some hard choices. Countries have done that. I think Italy's done that, and Australia's done that. it rubs against our very moral fibre not to give people a fair chance to apply the law.
I mean, many people would argue they haven't come here fairly anyway. It's not about natural law, it's about the law, isn't it? It's about whether they can actually use the law in the ways that you're talking about to say that this isn't something that is legal. And surely if they're signing, I mean, I'm not holding you responsible for this, of course, but if the government is signing a legally binding treaty with France, you would think they would have checked these things first.
Well, you say that, but the government's lawyers didn't check whether the Rwanda policy would fly. I said from the outset, when it first came out, it would not a single plane would take off. And I don't take any joy in being proved right. But
so in terms of no, I mean, you're absolutely right in that no flights took off. In this regard, do you think the likelihood is, I mean, are you happy to make as strong a suggestion about this scheme and say, as some of us believe, that there will be, I'm talking about viewers and listeners and me myself actually, that it's highly unlikely, I mean, you're an expert in immigration law, I am not, but it strikes me as highly unlikely that any migrant will actually return to France?
Well, that'll be dependent on what the courts say, but I think there's challenges both under the Convention and also under the Refugee Convention, European Convention and Refugee Convention, on the points I raised, the inadmissibility point. You see, if somebody comes to this country, they have a legal right to claim asylum. You cannot turn them around and say you can't claim asylum, we're sending you back to France. Now, that was because when we came out of the EU, we also came out of the Dublin Convention. And this treaty, in a way, replaces that convention, but there was recourse to the European courts if... I
mean, I don't want to sort of lose our viewers and listeners in regard to all this law, but the fact is that the Dublin Convention didn't really work, did it? In terms of the fact that the idea was that you claimed asylum in the first country you came to. It was never really adhered to, and the net gain for this country was very, very low.
Yes, I agree with you, but there was a legal framework to do that. Because people didn't implement it, doesn't mean it couldn't have worked. And it's exactly the same thing with the asylum system. It's not being implemented properly. Exactly the same thing with removing people who have failed asylum seekers. It's not being implemented. Exactly the same thing with foreign criminals. The law's there. The government is just not using it properly, hasn't got its act together to secure our borders. Now, the French, what do they want? Between now and June next year, the government will hope to increase the numbers. And in return, there'll be some horse trading, no doubt. And what the French want, and remember, this has been ratified by the member states and by European Parliament, this one in, one out policy. So what the European Union want is some sort of limited free movement back. And between now and June next year, you'll see that raising its head.
Could that be something like a youth mobility scheme, for example?
Yes, I mean, look, wouldn't you want a qualified engineer from Europe? Wouldn't you want a qualified doctor? Of course you would.
Well, if the immigration system worked properly, then we would get the people to fill the skills that we need. The fact is, it simply doesn't. And I don't think either of us who are coming at this from slightly different angles, of course, Ivan, actually believe that one in, one out will be anything that really helps things. It's been really interesting talking to you. Thank you for that, Ivan Sampson, who's an immigration lawyer. I don't agree with Ivan on everything, it must be said. He knows that, you know that from the way that interview went. But I think we can all agree that one in, one out is not the panacea the government would have us believe. I want to talk to James Mathewson now, former Labour spokesman, about the Minister for Homelessness. This is Rushanara Ali, who is an MP in the east of London. And she allegedly threw out tenants and then hiked rent by £700 a month ahead of a law change to ban that practice. She didn't break any laws, but if you're the homelessness minister and you're making people effectively homeless, well, that's not great, is it, James?
No, to say the least, Peter, it's not. I mean, she needs to resign, in my mind. It just is incompatible with what the government says on this issue and how the government positions itself, let alone the Labour Party and the wider Labour values around this and around how renting should be protected and the kind of noises that have come out of this government. It just doesn't make any sense for her to be in that position. I know Rushanara Ali, she's a very good MP. I wasn't aware of this, and it is fantastic. It's fantastically mind-opening, really, when you realise how many MPs there are who are in these kind of positions. I think 100 MPs in Parliament across the political parties made more than £10,000 last year from their rent on private properties as landlords. So, there are many landlords in Parliament that just don't think one of them should hold this position.
It's interesting. I mean, I don't see any real problem with an MP being a private landlord, but certainly if you're going to be a hypocrite and you're not going to go with the spirit of things, well, that's going to be problematic. Let's just remind ourselves of what the Conservative Party chairman, Kevin Hollingreck, has said on this.
I think it shows staggering hypocrisy. Rushnah Ali has been somebody who's obviously a government minister in charge of homelessness. She's spoken out about exploited tenants, about providing more protections for tenants. You can't say those things, then do the opposite in practice as a landlord. She's got to resign. I think as the law stands today, it was unethical, not illegal. But you can't just say one thing and do another. And that's what we see time and time again from some Labour ministers, saying one thing and doing another. So you're not bound by the law to follow it to the letter of the law. You can do the right thing by tenants, which most landlords in this country do. What Rushnah Ali has done, she's increased the rent deliberately by around 20%, by £700 a month. So that seems extremely unfair. The tenant wanted another tenancy, and that could have been assessed by an independent tribunal, but no, she decided to kick these tenants out, 4 tenants, and put new people in so she could have more money.
So there we are. That is the chairman of the Conservative Party, Kevin Hollingreck, saying that the Labour Homelessness Minister, who evicted 4 tenants from her townhouse before upping the monthly rent by £700, should resign. That is what the I newspaper is reporting, and she relisted it for hundreds of pounds more. She also attempted to charge them £2,400 for the house to be repainted and professionally cleaned. I reckon if you and I, James, we could do it for half that if we just got our overalls on and got out the Hoover. I mean, it just doesn't look good. It isn't good. And also, if this was a Conservative minister who had done this, Labour would be all over this like a rash, wouldn't they?
Of course I would. And you've got a Tory, you've got Kevin Hollingreck, sound like he makes sense to me. I mean, that for me to be put in that position.
Is that weird for you, James? Is that weird?
It's offensive for me to be in a position where I have to agree with a Tory. And also, by the way, if you and I went out to do those handiwork jobs, I think we'd look a bit like Laurel and Hardy or maybe the Chuckle Brothers even, but we best not. But
to you.
Exactly. But it's one of these things where you think, look, at the end of the day, if you're the minister in charge of homelessness and your job is to go into your department every day and reduce homelessness and to try and get people off the streets, and yet in your private life, in your private dealings and business dealings and investments, you have contributed to that by evicting tenants because you want more money out of them, then I'm sorry, that's completely incompatible.
It just shows a real lack of judgment as well. I mean, she must have at least had it somewhere in her mind that this was going to come out.
I just don't think some of them do, Peter. They get off of the roll, they go into it, they're excited, all the rest of it. And there's this kind of justification that happens with people, isn't there? Where, anything they do, they think, oh, well, I'm justified in doing that. I've come from a background that isn't privileged and I've worked hard for my things and all the rest of it. And we understand that, but just that inability to constantly check your privilege as you go through life and realise that, maybe I shouldn't be the person to try and, get people into homes and end this crisis that we have of homelessness in this country. If I'm contributing to that as a private landlord, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Can I ask you about one other big topic that's in the news today, about ID cards? There are loads of people getting in touch about this today. To be brutally honest, far more than we expected would get in touch. Lots of people want to have their say, and we will make sure that people do have their say. What do you make of ID cards? Tony Blair wanted to bring them in about 20 years ago. It seemed to be much more of a row then than it is now, but loads of people getting in touch with us on both sides of the argument, actually. Where do you fall on this, James?
I've changed my mind in recent times about this. I used to be, I didn't really have a huge issue with it. Look, I'm a typical lefty. I like a big state. I like the state to be able to interfere in people's lives and protect people and all the rest of it. But the more and more that I've seen the way that government have handled these issues, from the online safety bill to various other things, in this digital age and in this age of data and information sharing being, a currency in itself, I just don't feel comfortable, to be honest, with the government holding that power of having ID cards. I don't trust any government. Governments are interchangeable, and I don't like the step that it puts us towards I'm not going to say that it's authoritarian. I don't think it is. I think it comes from a good place, but it builds a foundation that could be used by the wrong people. And look, you have to think in government, when you give government extra powers, you have to think about the potential of who could be in government in the future.
It's also the worst case scenario, as you say. It's the worst case scenario from whatever perspective you're coming at this is. If there were to be a government that wanted to misuse this, how would they misuse it? Yeah. James, interesting thoughts there. Thank you for them. James Mathewson, former Labour spokesman. Star Wars has been in touch. I don't think the movie franchise, I think it's someone's calling themselves Star Wars 522 on Twitter, says, we have it in Sweden, but I wouldn't trust it in the UK. I wouldn't trust the UK government with it. DH Photo says, if ID cards keep us safer, then bring them on. But how are you going to give an ID card to an illegal immigrant when he's thrown his documents away and lied about where he's from, who he is, or what he's done? How is that possibly going to work? Sharon Martin simply says no to digital ID. And many other people getting in touch. Pauline says, Ivan is so depressing, we might as well just give up and let everyone in. Well, Pauline, I think the question we need to ask is, what about the legal framework? I'm not sure it's about schemes anymore. I think it's about the legal framework and a withdrawal, or at least derogation, so not doing all of the European Convention on Human Rights, I think is something we need to seriously think about when it comes to solving the migration problem in our country. We're going to talk about Israel in a second. Amy's been in touch and says, I've just seen what Netanyahu has said about taking military control of Gaza. I worry about what this may mean for the hostages still being held by Hamas, especially as we've seen those horrific videos of how they are already being treated. And yes, we have seen those videos over the past few days. They're absolutely horrendous. And there are 50 hostages, 20 of them perhaps living, we don't know exactly, that are still being held by Hamas terrorists. So is Netanyahu's plan the right one? We're going to talk to Jonathan Sacerdoti about that in just a second. Big breaking news that the Prime Minister of Israel says that he wants to take over all of Gaza. They currently have control of about 65 to 70% of it. We'll talk about that next, and you can let us know your thoughts too. 0344 499 1000.
And there are so many cases of people that we have tried to extradite, who have made groundless appeals time and time again. And so many activist immigration judges have come down with ridiculous rulings. We all know the chicken nuggets one, and there's a whole litany of other stupid decisions whereby they will not deport people who absolutely should not be here.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch. Lots on digital ID. I will come back to that, I promise. And also on Netanyahu's plan. Leslie says if he carries out this plan, will Egypt allow refugees from Gaza until Netanyahu succeeds? I'll put that question to Jonathan Sacerdoti, who's standing by. We'll come to him in a second. But let's just remind ourselves about what the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has said in regard to Israel intending to take full military control of all of Gaza. He spoke to Fox News.
You will go immediately into a meeting with your security cabinet. Will Israel take control of all of Gaza?
We intend to, in order to assure our security, remove Hamas there, enable the population to be free of Gaza, and to pass it to civilian governance. That is not Hamas and not anyone advocating the destruction of Israel. That's what we want to do. We want to liberate ourselves and liberate the people of Gaza from the awful terror of Hamas.
The journalist and broadcaster Jonathan Sacerdoti joins me now. Jonathan, this wasn't entirely unexpected, but it's nonetheless quite a big move from Netanyahu, isn't it?
It is indeed a big move, and it has to be said that I don't think that this was necessarily Israel's first resort. I think it's really the last resort. They've chosen to do this because all other possibilities have really been exhausted. And that's to say, this war's been grinding on for nearly 2 years now, and there have been all sorts of criticisms of Israel's conduct during the war that it's tried to redress at various points. But it has got to the point where they haven't fully defeated Hamas. They haven't stopped the threat from existing in the future to Israel. And indeed, the people living in Gaza are also, as Benjamin Netanyahu said in that interview excerpt that we've seen from Fox, they are living under the tyranny of Hamas as well. People have been asking constantly what will happen the next day. And so I think this is perhaps the answer to that question. Maybe some of those people didn't want to hear.
What do you expect the reaction to be? Because we're in a situation where Israel controls about between 65 and 70% of Gaza at the moment. Surely this will involve a huge stepping up of the military aspect of things, and you've got an Israeli public, 75% of whom who want the war to end, exhausted reservists, for example, who will not relish the challenges that this would bring militarily.
Yeah, there has been debate within Israel over whether or not this is the right approach, and there are those who think it is and those who think that it isn't. Ultimately, if this is the decision that is cleared and that is made, then, as you say, the military will have a part to play. In discussion so far, what the suggestion has been is that they will try and separate out the civilian population from the Hamas dictatorship, tyranny, jihadist, Islamist terrorists, and place them somewhere where they are able to be safe, where they're able, for example, to receive aid readily and safely and things like that, and where Hamas does not have control over their lives or over the Gaza Strip, or indeed, most importantly for Israel, over weaponry and the ability to attack Israel, whether it's by rockets and terrorism or whether it's by incursions and invasion, as they did on October the 7th, 2023. And that will be a very big undertaking. Now, Netanyahu has said in that interview that Israel doesn't want to keep the Gaza Strip. It doesn't want to govern it. It wants to hand it over eventually to Arab forces. Now, that could mean one of a few things. He's not been specific in the extract we've seen so far. It could mean either to find some form of alternative leadership within the Gaza Strip to Hamas. That certainly won't be easy. It could be to hand it over to the Palestinian Authority, but Benjamin Netanyahu and others have ruled that out previously because they are also corrupt and certainly not committed to non-violence. Or it could be to get involvement from other Arab countries, from neighbouring countries who may want to play a part in governing the Gaza Strip or may not. So all of those things will be challenges ahead. And that's why this won't be a simple end to the problem, to the conflict. It may indeed see it change in form, but it will be Israel taking control again in a way that it feels that it can make sure that that kind of horrific attack that happened in 2023 can't happen again, and that indeed the intolerable months and years before that can't happen again. Let's not forget that Israel withdrew completely from the Gaza Strip 20 years ago. It's around the 20th anniversary right now of that. It did so unilaterally, and the rockets were launched within 1 month of that withdrawal. Israel literally uprooted thousands of Israelis from the Gaza Strip where they lived, where they grew vegetables, where they had agriculture, where they lived in many ways alongside Arabs, and it withdrew them, hoping that that would be the beginning of the end of the conflict. But I think we saw took 18 years to manifest, but we saw the logical conclusion of that. It was that Hamas took over, it embedded itself in the population, it punished its own population, and then it created the climate in which it was able to carry out that horrific attack. Israel just won't tolerate that anymore. I think that's what Netanyahu is making clear here, and I think that he's making it clear that Israel will go to whatever ends it needs to make sure that it's going to keep itself safe, whilst also trying to respect the population of Gaza.
Well, Israel is quite isolated internationally. I just wonder what it does with regional players in regard to this, especially Egypt, of course, has a border with Gaza, although it has been controlled by the Israelis. I just wonder what Egypt does, or how big a player Egypt could be within this, do you think?
Yeah, the difficult part of all of this is that actually when you look at the reactions to Israel over the last 2 years, some of the harsher reactions actually do come out of places like the UK or France, rather than the neighbouring Arab countries, who of course do have concerns about the Palestinians and do express those concerns, but also they are far more realistic and aware of, I think, the problems and challenges that Israel is facing.
Because they have to deal with them. They just can't sit in their lefty ivory tower and say, isn't it all awful?
Yeah.
You dreadful people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly the point. So Egypt will have to decide exactly what it does do with its border. But even that, you know, over the years, much of the weaponry that Hamas has relied on, and indeed much of the smuggling generally that's helped them to finance their operation, has taken place over and under the border with Egypt. So Israel is going to keep a very strict control over that, rather than to allow it to be abused in the way that it has in the past, and that will be part of the cooperation between Egypt and Israel. I suspect that actually if Israel is able to somehow restore some form of proper governance to the Gaza Strip, it might be the case that Egypt will be more comfortable in coming to terms with having that population on the other side of its border. Don't forget, of course, that Egypt has not really been very friendly or helpful to the Palestinian people in Gaza. It hasn't let them come over the border during the war to escape. And similarly, Egypt has wiped out vast amounts of Rafah on its side of the border in the past. So it's not the case that Egypt is somehow innocent in all of this either.
Certainly. I wonder if I could ask you about something closer to home. This is the arrests that have been made after people firing water pistols at people who are, I use the term advisedly, visibly Jewish, wearing the garb that sometimes comes with being members of the Orthodox community. We know that there are 2 arrests in Bolton as a result of this. This wasn't just people firing water pistols. They were doing it apparently for a purpose, and they've been arrested on suspicion of racially aggravated assault. What do you make of this, Jonathan?
Certainly. I mean, on the one hand, water pistols aren't going to hurt people, but you can see from these images, these people appear to be picking on members of the public walking past their car simply because they are Jewish, and they can tell they're Jewish, as you say, because they're wearing the clothing that's associated with certain Orthodox Jews who dress that way. I think this is obviously quite deplorable behaviour, especially at a time when Jews, Orthodox, non-Orthodox, more visible or not visible, are being persecuted and punished, feeling very insecure and unsafe. So I think it's definitely good that people...
Well, Greater Manchester Police, this happened yesterday and it emerged online yesterday. I don't know if it happened yesterday, but it emerged online yesterday. And Greater Manchester Police appear to have got their act together, unlike Avon and Somerset Police, who are still investigating. Inquiries are ongoing in regard to Pascal Robinson Foster of Bob Villan. I mean, I could have come to a charging decision in about 20 minutes as a result of that. In fact, less than that, in regard to someone shouts death, death to the IDF to thousands of people. Guess what? It's incitement.
Yeah, quite right. I think that, it seems sometimes confusing to understand how different police forces act and what makes them act. Water pistols, in this case, certainly I do think this is something that you should be pursuing. But as you say, chanting for death of the IDF, the Jewish State's Army, and inciting a whole crowd to join in, things like that. And there have been plenty of other instances as well in the past. We've seen in the past that case some years ago, before even October the 7th, when men drove down with megaphones on their cars, shouting, F the Jews, rape their daughters, rape their sisters or mothers, I think it was. When we see things like that going on and those people tried, never put in jail, we do have to ask really how joined up the policing is. Perhaps the police are getting their house in order. I don't know. We'll find out, I suppose, as things unfold.
Just one more question, Jonathan. Did we hear your cat in the background there?
I'm not sure if it was a cat or if it was a dog. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, okay. No, I thought it was a cat. I just wanted to know whether it was called cat or doty. But I just wondered. Listen, thanks for your analysis today. I appreciate that. That's Jonathan Sacerdoti there, who is a journalist and broadcaster. What do you think of what Benjamin Netanyahu has done? Andy in Thatcham says Netanyahu has been left no other choice. Starmer, Macron and Carney saying they will recognise the Palestinian state was always going to push him to do this. He can't be seen to capitulate. We wouldn't have in this position. Well done, two-tier, says Andy in Thatcham there. John in Rugby says, I really do hope that those two scumbags with the water pistols have the smirk wiped off their faces in court, says John in Rugby. Well, they're being questioned at the moment. We'll see if they're charged. Gary in Birmingham says on ID as well. Actually, I'll read that in a second. Leslie says, if Netanyahu carries out his plan, will Egypt allow refugees from Gaza? We did answer that question with Jonathan. Gary says there are over 42 million people in the UK who hold a driving licence. Maybe everyone should apply for a licence instead of the digital ID that the government wants everyone to have. Lots more in digital ID. And indeed, Sarah Pochin, who spoke to us earlier on today on Twitter, Jospa, says, first thing, she has got 100% wrong. Speaking of Sarah Pochin, this is not a plastic card with your photo on. This is control over everything you do. Elma says, I have a passport, driving licence and national insurance number. Why should I be forced to get anything else? Another person says, your immigration bloke was wrong. We don't need any more doctors. On Mike's show this morning, he had a bloke on, I think from the Doctors Union, saying there are loads of unemployed junior doctors. That is correct. That is, there are many unemployed junior doctors. And the ones that want to go off to Australia, off you go. What I'd like you to do before you do is pay us back the £250,000 we've paid for you to train as a doctor. That would be really nice, and I think only fair. Angela says, I've been explaining the human rights farce regarding migration control. I think it's unfair on citizens of the UK to pay for these illegal people, and I would like to claim asylum somewhere as our government are persecuting its own people. Final one before the break from Izzy, who says, is it an offline ID or a digital ID? It's meant to be a digital ID. That's what the Conservatives are talking about. Having some form of identification is normal around the world, but digital ID can't be mandatory or used, rather misused for other things that don't need verification. I don't need ID to buy food. If they force you, they can track whatever you buy. Well, we know, of course, from loyalty cards that they often do that already, but it's not all together. It's not all in one place, and I do worry if everything was in one place. They say, right, your health record shows that you have high cholesterol, but you showed us you were buying lots of butter there. You should buy some low-fat spreads, and if you don't do that, we're going to, cut your benefits or whatever. It is control. It's putting all the information together. It's the metadata. That's what worries me. We'll talk in just a second to Felicity Cross, who's Deputy TV Editor of The Sun. There are lots of TV stories around in regard to Greg Wallace, accusers slamming the BBC for disregarding victims after the MasterChef has aired, with the sacked host despite a botched edit. A fresh BBC scandal after a top female star showed a explicit picture allegedly to horrified junior member of staff. Gary Lineker not going to present ITV's World Cup coverage. He shouldn't present a second more of television. He should be cancelled, in my strong view. And Charlie State has a probe after a string of complaints. This is after complaints about his co-host Naga Munchetty, the BBC Breakfast host. You don't need to watch either of them. You can just watch Mike Graham's Morning Glory. We'll talk to Felicity in just a second. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Paul in Canterbury, who says, "Good afternoon, Peter." Good afternoon, Paul. Why can't UN peacekeepers manage Gaza in the future? Peter says it could have been acid in those water pistols. You're absolutely right. And Rachel says, "I don't think Israel has any other choice than to take control of the Gaza Strip. Hamas need to be eradicated in order for them to be able to live in peace." And final one for the moment, Margaret in Birmingham says, "Starmer should recall Parliament now. We can all see we are being invaded by hundreds of people who should not be here. This one in, one out is a gimmick. When will he get a backbone and do what he is supposed to do?" says Margaret. Well, let's talk now about the loads of different TV stories. The BBC under pressure on 3 separate fronts that I can see. Felicity Cross is with us, the Deputy TV Editor of The Sun. Hello, Felicity.
Hello. Yeah, I mean, they're making their own news now, aren't they?
Certainly are. Yeah, Greg Wallace. I mean, have you watched MasterChef? I haven't seen it myself. I've never been a fan of MasterChef, to be honest, but apparently very heavily edited. And of course, this new scandal today in terms of this accusation of disregarding victims.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, look, I've never been a MasterChef fan, but certainly now there's a new interest in it because of all of these allegations against Greg and John, which obviously saw them lose their jobs this summer. So all eyes were on MasterChef when it came back to telly yesterday. Now, obviously, what became apparent was very difficult to actually edit them out. So there was something like 100 times they featured in that first episode. But what was missing was the banter. And this is obviously where they got themselves in trouble in the first place. So there was one incident where a woman talked about stuffing, which is a clear green light to someone like Greg Wallace, who has that greengrocer banter that he's talked about before, but it swiftly cut to another scene. So little moments like that, it was obvious, but yeah, they've pressed on with airing this series, despite there being a backlash, certainly from certain organisations, and even one of the contributors for the series actually spoke out and said, "I said to the BBC, please don't air this series."
What do you think? Should they air it or should they not?
It's so difficult because there's 60, 70 budding chefs who invested time, money, time away from work, all because they thought this could see their dreams come through. It's not. So should they be punished? You know, potentially they could have reshot the series, give them a chance, but then it would potentially come up with a different result. I think the solution probably could have been putting on iPlayer but not airing it, because then you would make a clear choice to watch it. You'd be consenting to watching this programme with these 2 bad guys, and then there'd be that element of choice. But certainly for our national broadcaster that we're all funding to platform these 2 people that have been found to have done wrong in the independent report, I can see why people have been upset about it.
Tell us about another BBC scandal. A top female star allegedly showed a picture of, a male anatomy to a horrified junior member of staff. Talk us through this.
I mean, absolutely bonkers, this. I think certainly the fact that it's a woman has been the thing that's really shocked everyone. My phone has been blowing up. Who is the woman? Who is she?
Of course, everyone wants to know.
Of course, but I mean, as you can imagine, for various legal reasons, we can't yet tell you, but certainly she's very high up in the BBC. She's in that top 50 best paid, and it's shocking to hear who it is. So the situation came about behind the scenes. She asked a junior member of staff, "Oh, do you like this sort of thing?" Showed them it on her phone, and it just makes me think, if we did that in this workplace, we'd be absolutely expecting some sort of repercussions.
You'd be marched to HR.
Exactly.
That's just not something you do.
Yeah, and in the incident that the younger member of staff complained, that the woman was asked to apologise to her, and that's as far as it went. And my question here is, we shouldn't be asking who it is, we should be asking why this was allowed to happen and why this woman is still at the BBC.
Well, the other thing, I mean, the 2 are linked in some way, in that, you know, Greg Wallace being out of control, there were 17 years of complaints. That's not just a failure of Greg Wallace, it's a failure of management as well.
Absolutely.
It's a failure of someone who should take a presenter aside. Happened to me on one occasion, not for anything like this, it must be said, where a manager just said, "Don't do that, don't speak to people like that, don't do that particular thing." And actually that was really good, because that was quite early in my career as a presenter, haven't done anything like that since. I hope usually get on with people, but I mean, if people think they can get away with these things, well, then they'll just do more and more, and the boundaries just won't be there.
Exactly. So what we're seeing as a whole pattern throughout all of these scandals is this reverence to talent at the BBC. It's all, don't upset the talent, oh, it's just the way that he is. That was Greg's example here. You know, they hired a greengrocer and that's what I gave them. Yeah. And they were allowed to get away with it because it was the talent, you know.
Well, I've said this before on air. A very senior executive at a broadcasting organisation, not this one, said to me one time that there's one rule for presenters, one rule for everybody else. Let's talk about another presenter under fire, another BBC presenter. This is Charlie State. We know, as The Sun has been reporting, that Naga Munchetti, the BBC breakfast presenter, has been under fire. Now a string of complaints about Charlie State.
Yeah, exactly. So that breakfast duo, they cover Thursday to Saturday together. So Naga is under review ahead of a formal investigation, so it might not reach that point, but they're certainly looking at a huge string of complaints against her, and the same is now happening with Charlie. So this is all unravelled since the editor of BBC Breakfast, Richard Frediani, was investigated formally by an external consultant for his bad conduct behind the scenes, alleged bullying, that kind of thing. And certainly it sounds like Charlie and Naga are now under the cosh for the same thing. So this is an award-winning daytime show. It should be, you know, high standards, soft and fluffy. You know, they won a BAFTA for the reporting of the post office scandal, and now the scandals are all on them. And I think we go back to the fact that we pay for the BBC.
Of course.
They should be held to a higher regard, and we should hold them to account, which is what we try and do at The Sun.
Let's talk about ITV and their World Cup coverage. So no plans. That's always interesting when people say no plans for Gary Lineker to present ITV World Cup coverage. They haven't ruled it out completely. So they haven't said it's definitely not happening.
Yeah, so what we now know from our assistant editor Clemmy Moody is that Gary's got a new job at ITV. So he's fronting an entertainment show for them. It's called The Box. It's been a huge success in Norway. So his first step with them has been something fluffy, primetime Saturday night, but surely that job on the sports desk is coming. They'd be mad not to offer it to him. Certainly they've been sniffing around him for years, and they very much see the
And he's another
loss.
untouchable as well. You know, if he tweeted something out about women or gay people or black people or Muslims or whatever, but apparently it's okay to retweet things that are anti-Semitic as long as you apologise for it. I mean, TV is in crisis at the moment. There are just so many scandals, and I'm sure more to come as well, Felicity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that people... The problems that people have faced are now coming out, aren't they? That's the thing. Is it that it's always been there and now we're just finding out about it? I think because people are now not as afraid to speak up. You know, once the ball has started rolling, people feel that they can weigh in with their experiences.
Yes, yes.
Certainly now, people text, tweet, social media without thinking, and then it's something that they might not potentially say to someone's face, but once they're behind a screen, they feel a bit different, don't they?
And it's recorded and all the rest of it.
Looser lips.
And that's it. Felicity, great to talk to you as always. Felicity Cross there, Deputy TV Editor of The Sun. Lots of discussing all of this. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. Joel says the point of digital ID is that it's a precursor and a prerequisite of a digital currency. This has been the whole goal of unfettered illegal immigration. And on the Bank of England, Kevin says, I agree with your caller who says the Bank of England has been politicised. I've thought this for a long while. I think it was actually Sir John Redwood said that as well. The only reason for the interest rate cuts at the moment is to help their left-wing mates in government. Brackets, it doesn't. Because what you gain with a little less to pay on your mortgage, you lose through excruciatingly high taxes this government regularly heaps upon us. The government keep banging on about how their interest rates have been reduced under their tenure. But is anyone feeling better off at all through it? I'm working and I am skint, says Kevin in Sheffield. Kevin, I know a lot of people who feel exactly the same way. Lots more to discuss, including the sport. Stay with us here on Talk.
And there are so many cases of people that we have tried to extradite who have made groundless appeals time and time again. And so many activist immigration judges have come down with ridiculous rulings. We all know the chicken nuggets one, and there's a whole litany of other stupid decisions whereby they will not deport people who absolutely should not be here.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, plenty more to discuss. Bridie's been in touch. So please point out to the people like Sarah Pochin that EU countries have ID cards and they have the same problems as the UK. It solves nothing. The EU is proof of that. Jane says there are many people who don't have a smartphone. Their lives are not an app for everything thing and prefer to use cash and not cards. Are they just going to be excluded from society? Like if they didn't have the jab, says Jane. Well, it's really interesting you mentioned that actually, because my father's mystery female companion, who I'm banned from talking about on air, she uses a checkbook and doesn't do online banking, for example. So, I mean, that's perfectly within her right to do that, but there aren't many people who do that. And I think this expectation is that everyone has a smartphone and somehow uses these things. Sally says, as far as housing is concerned, why doesn't the government allow shared ownership on older properties? I'm a landlord and would be more than happy to offer my property up on a shared ownership basis rather than pure rental to tenants to enable them to get onto the property ladder. Sally, that's a good idea. Leslie says, why should I have to have an ID card to help keep track on illegal migrants who, if they throw their documents overboard, don't have an ID? I think that's a perfectly good point. And the thing is that, you know, they're not going to give you these digital IDs for free. You're going to have to pay for them. Cliff in Berkshire says, Sir John Redwood, the greatest Chancellor we never had, his problem was he was too clever for those around him. And Keith says, I have no problem with an ID card. I lived in Spain for 22 years. And you have to have an ID card with your NIE number, presumably you mean national insurance number, photo and fingerprint. Surely only those with something to hide are against ID cards. And final one before we go to the sport. Kevin in Liverpool says, I haven't got an issue with having an ID card. What happens if you're caught without one? Are you swiftly put in a bus to a 4-star hotel, all-inclusive, mobile phone, preloaded credit card, driving lessons, etc.? Why aren't all these illegal immigrants tagged? We wouldn't need ID cards. The government know who we are. We have passports and birth certificates. Great show, says Kevin in Liverpool. Thank you, Kevin. Now it is time for the
Sport Summary on Talk.
Sam Ellard is with us. Sam, big transfer news in the last few hours. Manchester United finally get their man. Tell us who it is.
Yeah, finally being the key word there, Peter. They have agreed a deal worth £73.7 million to be precise, with Leipzig to sign Benjamin Šeško. The agreement includes a guaranteed payment of just over £66 million, with the remainder going to be add-on. So he's now going to complete the formalities, but that isn't expected to be any problem. We think he's going to undergo a medical tomorrow. And yeah, it's kind of been one of the kind of big transfer sagas of this summer. Man United needing to sign a centre forward. They haven't really been sure who they've wanted, but in the last couple of weeks they've turned their attention to Šeško. What's made the deal even more interesting is that Newcastle have also wanted to sign Benjamin Šeško. There was even some reports that Newcastle had actually bid more than Man United for the player, but the player wanted Manchester United, so is therefore going to go to Manchester United. So it looks like that is finally going to get done. What it means for Newcastle, we're not sure, because of course what makes it even more complicated, Newcastle already have a striker in Alexander Isak, who Liverpool want to sign. So we'll have to wait and see if Newcastle turn their attention to another centre forward, and if they do that, that could open the door for Liverpool to maybe come back in for Alexander Isak, who they've already had one bid rejected for. But the big news today, we understand that Man United have finally agreed a deal for Benjamin Šeško, and we believe sooner rather than later he will be a Man United player, and he's a very good player, so it's a good signing for Manchester United.
I can't believe I called him Sesko yesterday. People will think I'm not an expert in football. Elsewhere, the Spurs captain has left for the United States. Where did he decide to go?
Yeah, by the way, don't worry, I do this job on a regular basis and I always get pronunciations wrong. So you're absolutely fine. But yeah, it's spelled S-E-S, but I write it with an H after the S. Yeah, Sheshko is what it's going to be. But yeah, Son Heung-min, who we learned about a week ago, wasn't it? He was going to leave Tottenham Hotspur after 10 years of the club. He's going over to America and he's going to be playing for Los Angeles FC. He's admitted it wasn't his first choice, but a chat with the club's president changed his heart to join for a record major league fee, which is in excess of £20 million. Yeah, he left Spurs after 10 years. He's 33 years of age. Maybe at this stage of his career, I think he maybe would have wanted one more move, maybe to play somewhere in Europe in kind of a European competition. But he's gone over to America, so we wish him the best of luck. But there's some really bad news for Tottenham, is that James Maddison, he limped off in a friendly last week, and we've learned that he suffered an anterior cruciate ligament injury, expected to miss the majority of the forthcoming season. So I mean, listen, there's never a good time, obviously, for a player to pick up a serious injury. But Thomas Frank's got into Tottenham, new club. Son decided to move on. And now James Maddison, one of their best players, one of their best sort of attacking players, to suffer that freak injury in pre-season and to miss pretty much the whole of next season is a huge blow for Tottenham, and obviously James Maddison as well. So with a week and a bit to go until the season starts, it looks like Spurs and Thomas Frank will probably have to go back into the transfer market to maybe try and sign another attacking player, with Son leaving and James Maddison out for the majority of the season.
And tell us as well about the nominations for the title of the world's best footballer. Who's up for the gong? I'm really surprised I have not made the list, Sam.
Yeah, I mean, I'll basically anyone that's half decent has been nominated for this. But there is one player that kind of jumps out as a bit of a wow. Former Man United midfielder Scott McTominay has been nominated. He was one of the 13 nominees. And this is quite a nice story because he was a player that was at Man United for many years, ever since he was a kid, and never really did anything there, kind of always a bit part player. But he went to play his football last season for Napoli, and they had an unbelievable season going on and winning the league, and he was one of their best players. Napoli fell in love with Scott McTominay and vice versa. So quite a nice story that for many years at Man United, not really doing it, and then he, new league, new environment, and now he's one of the many players nominated. So good luck to Scott McTominay, good for him. And normally the team that wins either if there's a World Cup or Euros, they win it, but there wasn't any of that last summer. So probably a PSG player winning the Champions League could win it. So maybe Ousmane Dembele. He scored all the goals for PSG as they won the Champions League, so he's got a pretty good chance.
And in yet more football news, tell us what's happening with Michail Antonio.
Yeah, so the news here really is that he's the confirmation saying that he's going to leave West Ham. He was involved in a really awful car accident last December. Hasn't played for the club since. His contract did expire in June. He was obviously recovering from his injuries over the last few months. There was talk of maybe an extension in East London. He'd been in the football club for 10 years. We've learned today there will be no extension. He's going to leave the football club. Most importantly, he's looking to play football again, which is the most important thing. But yeah, he leaves West Ham with their best wishes. He was there for 10 years. An amazing player for them. But he won't be playing for them next season.
Sam, thank you. That's Sam Ellard there, talkSPORT presenter, with all the sport today. Thanks also to Marcus, who says every developed country uses digital IDs, or just IDs in general. I don't see why people are going mad about it. As a foreigner, I still can't get my head around how people in the UK go around without their ID, and at the same time you're crying that you can't control crime or people. Get everyone ID and carry it on. If I were you, I would start worrying about more illegal immigration and what Starmer is making out of the UK, which is a laughing stock. Good afternoon, Peter, says Mike in Warwickshire. When the Bank of England cuts rates, it's in response to economic weakness. A strong and well-managed economy usually leads to higher interest rates, so for the government to spin that as a win is misleading at best. John Roberts in Germany, presumably not the Chief Justice of the United States, says regarding one in, one out, so the one in would have cost on average £51,000. We send them back at our cost, average £15,000. Then we pay France for their migrant, who will then be given a right to stay, will then call for their relatives to be united with them, which will probably equate to an average of 6 times £51,000 and higher migration. Pure genius. genius, says John Roberts. Stephen Millings in Belfast says, I've watched every episode of MasterChef. Says Lloyd Grossman. Stephen, you're showing your age there. I remember Lloyd Grossman. I remember him through the Keyhole as well. Loved Last Night, but a little light on humour. I'm still a fan, says Stephen. And Lee says, afternoon Peter, on ID cards, I moved to the Netherlands 3 years ago and would have been dead against ID cards before having one. It works really well here. You can't do anything without an ID card. No bank account, no renting an apartment, no job, nothing. Probably a reason why we don't have many illegal immigrants here, says Lee. Well, I can honestly say I went to Amsterdam a couple of weeks ago, and it seemed to be a pretty well-run society. Certainly the bits of Amsterdam that I was in were generally pretty relatively clean, and certainly public transport worked very well. Things seemed to be on time. People seemed to be happy. Prices weren't ridiculously high. They weren't that cheap, but they weren't ridiculously high, certainly not London prices. So I enjoyed my visit to Amsterdam, and that was something that a city I may well return to. Lots to discuss in the next hour. Mark Francois is going to join us after the news as Shadow Defence Minister. Ben Wallace, the former Defence Secretary, says invite Britain to peace talks or Zelensky will be bullied. It'll be very interesting to see what happens there. Also, the first migrants have been detained under the one in, one out deal with France. Will it work? Lots to discuss, and I want your thoughts too. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good evening. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company here on Talk Drive. We're going to talk to the Shadow Defence Minister, Mark Francois, in a second. Lots to discuss with him, including the big breaking news this afternoon about Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister there, says he wants to take over all of Gaza. We also know that Trump, Zelensky and Putin may meet for talks next week. Ben Wallace, the former Defence Secretary of this country, says that Britain should be there or Zelensky will get bullied. We'll ask Mark Francois what he thinks about that. Also, we've seen interest rates go down and the first migrants detained under the one in, one out deal. And ID cards as well. Big one today. Loads of people getting in touch. You can have your say on that. We'll take more calls before 7 o'clock. Lots to discuss on that. Do you think digital ID should be a thing? Would you be happy to have one? Some people say nothing to worry if you haven't got anything to hide. Other people say, well, actually, this is something that the government should be against. The Conservatives seem to have opened the door to it a little bit. Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, talking about that. Lots to discuss with Mark, and indeed we'll talk to Henry Hill as well, the Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, and Steve Gill will tell us what's happening in America too. And plenty of time, as I say, for all your calls. So lift the phone and get on the air. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note, less than a minute, please. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss before Kevin O'Sullivan comes up at 7 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Should say I am here tomorrow for Drive, and then over the weekend on Saturday and Sunday between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. So lots to discuss. And then Jeremy's actually back on Drive on Monday. He's been having a well-earned, certainly a holiday anyway. Mark Francois is with us now, the Shadow Defence Minister and Conservative MP for Raleigh and Wickford. Mark, you're very welcome to the programme. How are you doing?
Good afternoon.
Tell me, first of all, what you make of what Benjamin Netanyahu has said. I actually just want to play a clip before I get your reaction. He said that Israel intends to take military control of all of Gaza. This is what the Israeli Prime Minister has said.
You will go immediately into a meeting with your security cabinet. Will Israel take control of all of Gaza?
We intend to, in order to assure our security, remove Hamas there, enable the population to be free of Gaza, and to pass it to civilian governance. That is not Hamas and not anyone advocating the destruction of Israel. That's what we want to do. We want to liberate ourselves and liberate the people of Gaza from the awful terror of Hamas.
Well, that is Benjamin Netanyahu speaking to Fox News. This seems to be not entirely unexpected, but nonetheless quite a shift for the Israeli government. Mark, what do you make of it?
Well, I think we all want to see a ceasefire in Gaza as soon as practically possible. We want to see the fatalities stop. We want to see humanitarian aid stepped up. But we also want to see the hostages released. Hamas could release those remaining hostages tomorrow, and they consistently refuse to do that. So if we want a ceasefire, which I think most right-thinking people do, and we want the fatalities to stop, then we need Israel to move, but we also need Hamas to release those hostages.
Well, Israel has moved, and I wonder whether you think this makes getting the hostages back alive. We think there are 20 of the 50 that are still alive, but the bodies, of course, are being held by Hamas terrorists. Do you think stepping up this military action, which about 75% of the Israeli public are against, they want the war to end, is actually safeguarding the hostages, or is this something, in your opinion, that Netanyahu has to do?
Well, Peter, as you intimate, I think it's probably sadly true that a number of those hostages are no longer alive. But even in those cases, for very human reasons, you know, their families will want those bodies brought home. And I think we need to understand the pain and the suffering that they are going through. I mean, interestingly, as I understand it, there have to be elections in Israel under their constitution by the end of October at the latest. So we're not far away from a general election in Israel. So the people of Israel will be able to give their verdict on the government within a few months.
But what's your verdict, Mark? Do you think Netanyahu's right to do this?
I'm not sure he is. I noticed that there was that intervention by nearly 600 senior security officials in Israel, including the previous heads of Mossad and Shin Bet.
And the IDF as well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that to me was an extremely powerful intervention. And that is by Israelis, that's not Brits or Americans or Iranians or indeed anyone else. I think we all want to see a ceasefire as soon as possible. We want to see the hostages, be they dead or alive, released. Hamas can have no future role in the governance of Gaza. There, I think Netanyahu is correct. But I'm not sure that stepping up the military effort at this time is the right thing to do.
Okay. Let's turn to another major matter of foreign policy. Ben Wallace, the former Defence Secretary, your former colleague on the Conservative benches, says that Britain should be invited to peace talks which may occur between Trump, Putin and Zelensky. Do you think that should happen?
Well, the Conservative Party's consistent position has been that there should be no negotiations about Ukraine without Ukraine being in the room. So I think Trump has now started to harden his position with Putin. He's threatened sanctions on other countries that buy Russian oil. That, I think, has, as it were, brought Putin to the table. We need to see whether this summit between Trump and Putin actually takes place. But assuming for a moment that it does, and there are subsequent negotiations, it's absolutely imperative that the Ukrainians, and ideally Zelensky, are part of that negotiation, because it's their country's fate that is being negotiated. So, and you know, and Ben Wallace is a personal friend of mine, and I understand the point that Ben is making, but I think Zelensky showed in that famous meeting with Trump in the White House he's more than capable of looking after himself.
So the sort of addition of Keir Starmer or David Lammy or whoever, perhaps not necessary?
Well, perhaps not in the first instance. I mean, if there is going to, there's a number of stages here. Firstly, you need to get a ceasefire, and I think the risk is that Putin continues to play this out. He thinks that on the battlefield he's winning, despite Russia having suffered almost 1 million casualties since the full-scale invasion in 2022. But in Putin's mind, one village at a time, at great cost, he's winning. So I think it's good if Trump is, in pub English, calling his bluff. And if we now see whether or not Putin is serious about a ceasefire. If he is, and I'm slightly sceptical, but if he is, then you've got to involve Ukraine. And if there is a ceasefire deal, then there's all this talk of a coalition of the willing, including the UK, to help provide troops and aircraft to back up that ceasefire. Clearly, at that stage, we would have to be involved, as would our senior NATO partners. But there's a sequence to go through here. First, Putin and Trump probably have to meet, and then you have to feed the Ukrainians, i.e. Zelensky, into the process.
Sure.
And there can only be a ceasefire if it's something Ukrainians can accept.
Do you agree with the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown when he says the defence budget should be moved outside the current fiscal rules that Rachel Reeves has? So essentially, you could actually borrow to pay for what is day-to-day spending. He sort of argues it's not really day-to-day spending because it's so fundamental to the defence of the realm. What do you make of that?
Well, the government is borrowing on a vast scale, as it is. There is a risk of a bond market strike. Of international investors refusing to lend us more money because the government is borrowing so much.
Well, the rates are even higher than the financial crash caused by Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz Truss.
Yes, because we're having to pay a premium to international investors to continue to lend us money. Now, on the defence point specifically, here's a fundamental problem. We had the much vaunted defence review. It's all smoke and mirrors, Peter. When you go into the weeds of it, which is what people like James Cartledge and my boss and I are paid to do, there's no new money really for 2 years. The government are using the £3 billion a year that they give to Ukraine and counting that as part of the UK defence budget, even though that is not the way it's normally done. That's historically been separate and from the Treasury Reserve. So they're already rolling in that money to make the UK defence budget look bigger. So there's tremendous smoke and mirrors going on. And what Gordon Brown is suggesting, on one level, threatens to muddy the waters even more. Labour have announced a defence review. It's contingent on spending 3% of GDP on defence, specifically on defence, by the time you get into the early 2030s, the three reviewers were very clear about that. Labour will not promise to spend that money because Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, will not permit it.
Yeah. Speaking of smoke and mirrors, do you have any confidence that this one in, one out plan that the Conservatives originally wanted to do, now Labour are doing it, will work?
No. I mean, look, the way that Labour are articulating this, it's a gimmick. And it's not one in, one out, as you and others have pointed out. It's one out.
17 in, one out. Yeah.
You know, I mean, everyone can see it's a gimmick. They won't even tell us how many people are involved, you know, in the first wave of this. The truth is, Labour are desperately scrabbling around. Every week they come up with some new gimmick or initiative, and the boats keep arriving. The only way you stop those boats is with a firm deterrent, which is something akin to what was our Rwanda plan, which Labour scrapped in a fit of pique on coming to office. The brutal truth is they have absolutely no clue about how to stop the boats. So every week there's a new gimmick, and yet the boats keep coming. And that's why the public rightfully is so annoyed.
One final thought from you, Mark, on ID, digital ID. Your colleague on the front benches, Chris Philp, has said he's thinking about it, he's looking into it. This is something that the former Prime Minister Tony Blair wanted about 20 years ago, but digital IDs would be slightly different. What is your thought on this? Because I can safely say our viewers and listeners are divided on this one.
Well, historically, the Conservative Party has been opposed to ID cards, you know, on the grounds of civil liberties. So that's our starting position. I've seen the media reports. I contacted Chris Philp earlier this afternoon, and he has assured me that we are not looking at this as part of our policy review. And therefore, I think it's very unlikely that this is something that will be going
So as a principle, you're against it, Mark?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
But very quickly, I noticed that Nigel Farage is against and Sarah Potchin is now for. So Reform seem to be completely at sixes and sevens over this, because in Reform, the policy-making process is just whatever Nigel says on any given day, isn't it?
Well, if it were, then maybe Sarah Potchin would agree with him. But yes, that's a fair point. Mark Francois there, Shadow Defence Minister, Conservative MP for Raleigh and Wickford. Thank you to him. Susie is on the line from Hertfordshire. She's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Susie, what would you like to say this evening?
Hi, Peter.
Hi there.
Firstly, condolences for James, for everyone at all.
Thank you. That's really kind, Susie. Thank you.
And also to his family and Lady W. I am so dead against this idea of a ceasefire. It is beyond words. Every single time Israel has had to sit down, agree, and the bombs still come. For the last 2 days, there have been sirens in Israel coming out of Gaza. Mm-hmm. And we don't need an agreement. We need to be done with threats from across borders, and we just need to be able to be the sovereign country that she is.
It's interesting from Netanyahu's perspective, because he's talking about a huge stepping up of the military side of this, isn't he? If he wants to take all of Gaza, I mean, those are going to be the toughest bits to take. The reservists, for example, basically, you know, adult males in Israel up to a certain age are generally reservists. There are lots of people who've been there in the military for 400, 500 days. You know, there are 75% of Israelis who want a ceasefire, for example, or at least want the war to end in some way. I just wonder if he can bring people with him, Susie.
We just want our hostages back.
Yeah. But will that happen? Will this make that more likely, do you think, Susie? Because I want that to happen. I don't want it to happen tomorrow. I want it to happen today.
I agree with you. I am completely with you. The scenes that we've seen this week, the fact that there are people that have been there for close to 670 days.
Yeah, that's right.
And enough's enough.
So is Netanyahu doing the right thing, do you think, Susie?
Yeah, completely.
Okay.
We're talking about a terrorist organisation that are make-believe playing government, okay? If you want to talk about the famine, it's Hamas's responsibility. It was the UN's responsibility to go and get the food.
What I think should happen, Susie, is that Netanyahu should flood Gaza with food. I think he should give loads and loads of food. I think he should bring it all in.
Have you not seen some of the videos?
Well, Hamas are using it as a weapon. They're using it and they're selling it to their own people. It's horrendous.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that in itself is a war crime. But the thing that you need to remember is that they are doing it. I'm going to say something really controversial, and I apologise.
You can say what you like, Susie. Within the law, we are the home of free speech.
But to Hamas, Palestinian lives don't matter. To Iran, Palestinian lives don't matter. Their lives and these people and these children and these women that we hear about continuously, they're being used as a weapon of war. Let's starve our people. Let's make them look like they're walking skeletons because it will promote the propaganda. Let's kill X amount of people at GHF because then we can blame Israel. Let's do all of these things.
Well, Israel has been criticised for that as well, Susie, but listen, in terms of the thrust of what you're saying, in terms of the fact that Hamas have used people as human shields and that they don't care about people, they want high casualties because they know it's a propaganda victory. On that, I think we can agree. Susie, thank you very much. So Susie in Hertfordshire there. Steve's been in touch and says Starmer should be nowhere near any peace negotiations for Ukraine, given his previous disasters. He'll end up giving Ukraine to Russia. He'll probably end up throwing Northern Ireland in there too, says Steve. Well, let's hope that doesn't happen. I for one, don't want Vladimir Putin. I think the tyrannical regimes in Northern Ireland are bad, but they're not as bad as Vladimir Putin on some level anyway, certainly what's gone before. But yes, listen, lots to talk about. Let us know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss here on Talk. We're going to talk about the Conservative Party and indeed digital ID cards in a second. Lots of people want to get in on that and we'll take more calls, so stay with us.
And there are so many cases of people that we have tried to extradite who have made groundless appeals time and time again. And so many activist immigration judges have come down with ridiculous rulings. We all know the chicken nuggets one. And there's a whole litany of other stupid decisions whereby they will not deport people who absolutely should not be here.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, you just heard Mark Francois of the Conservative Party frontbencher there talk about his opposition to ID cards. Chris Philp, who is the Shadow Home Secretary for the Conservatives, saying he's having a little think about it, but of course the policy is still against it. It's been an interesting day in that regard. I think the Conservatives are a little bit at 6s and 7s on that, but also Reform UK don't really seem to know what they think. I spoke to Sarah Pochin a little bit earlier on. We'll play a bit of that in a second, but first I want to bring in Henry Hill, who's Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. Good evening, Henry.
Good evening.
Can you just talk us through this in terms of what has really happened over the past 24 hours in terms of digital ID and the Conservative Party? Just talk us through who said what when and where we are at the moment, because there seems to be a bit of jiggery-pokery in terms of what their policy actually is.
Well, I mean, I haven't taken a list of every single backbencher. Not that the Conservatives really have backbenchers at this point; they don't have enough MPs. But as you say, essentially, the Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp has indicated that he is going to look at this, presumably with some kind of sign-off from Kemi Badenoch, and a lot of Conservatives who are traditionally opposed to ID cards have spoken up against it. Now, I think that the reason that the Conservatives, and indeed, as you say, Reform UK, are a bit divided on this, is that historically both of would have been opposed to ID cards. You know, there's that famous saying, you know, we're not a papers, please society. But the problem is that actually the fact that we don't have any form of national ID card, which is very common on the continent, is one of the big factors that makes this country so attractive for illegal migrants. Because it's very hard once somebody gets into this country, if they abscond from a visa or whatever, for them to actually get caught and for us to police the black economy, for us to, you know, landlords and so on, make sure that they can try and catch illegal migrants. And so for as long as that's the case, it will be one of the biggest so-called pull factors that bring people here. And that's why on the right, there has been in some circles this shift towards, well, okay, one of the big reasons that these migrants are moving through Germany, they're moving through France, they're moving through, you know, these other countries in their way and coming to Britain is that it's very hard, or much harder, to work and live illegally in those countries on a day-to-day basis because you need this government ID scheme and we don't have one.
I just want to remind ourselves about the conversation we had with Sarah Pochin a little bit earlier on. This was at the start of the programme. I asked her what she thought about digital IDs, and that seems to contrast with what Nigel Farage thinks about digital IDs. This is just a replay of a bit of our conversation from earlier. What about what Chris Philp is now saying, the Shadow Home Secretary, on ID cards? What do you feel about ID cards, digital ID cards? Is that something that Reform UK would support?
Well, look, I personally don't have a problem with an ID card. You know, I don't see what the issue is. Most of our most of our information now is on our smartphones anyway.
Can we trust the system, though?
Well, what's more, how much more could we be at risk? As I say, all of our information is out there in a cloud, in the ether, whatever you want to call it. It's all available, isn't it? We can all be tracked now if somebody wants to track us. Oh, apart from illegal asylum seekers coming in.
Your party leader, Nigel Farage, says he's against them. So you're for them, but he's against them.
Look, I'm just saying that personally, I don't have a problem with it.
What's the Reform Party policy on it? Your leader seems to be saying one thing, you seem to be saying something else, Sarah.
I don't think we have a clear policy at the moment. If we do, then I don't know what it is. You know, but the point is I'm giving you my opinion.
Sure.
Nigel might have a different opinion, and when I chat to him next, I'll bring it up and see what the right thing to, you know, not what we are saying.
Sure.
But I'm just giving you my opinion.
Yep.
I don't have a problem with it. I think it's got to come. And what I would say about ID cards is it will identify people that are coming in illegally, and if we took their DNA and if we did the facial recognition at places like Marston, the place in Kent where they all pass through, then we'd have a much better track on people in the community being dispersed through houses of multiple occupation, such that when crimes are committed, sexual attacks on women take place, we can track down these individuals. So, you know what, personally, I don't have a problem with it.
So Sarah Pochin there making clear that she disagrees with her party leader, Nigel Farage, on that. Is that just healthy debate within a political party, Henry, or has she made a mistake here, do you think?
I mean, I think it is. I think they could both be true. I think that actually political parties should have more open debate about what their policies are, rather than having them cooked up by a close circle around the leader, and then sort of everyone pretending and wheeling about and pretending that whatever happens to be announced is what they have all always deeply believed. It might be a problem because obviously Farage doesn't particularly take well to challenges, but he's probably a big man enough to allow dissent on this topic.
And she wasn't exactly challenging him, I suppose. She was simply saying, "This is my opinion. He thinks something else. We'll talk about this and come up with some policy on it." So maybe we should sort of, you know, I am wary of people saying, "Oh, it's a problem. It's a rift or whatever." I mean, she essentially is just saying, "I have a slightly different take on this to my party leader, so maybe it's all right."
Yeah, I do think so, and I think that interested you in that discussion. You touched on one of, I think there are two main vectors for objection. One is, as you say, do you trust the system? You know, government ID contracts have a horrible reputation. You're potentially collating an awful lot of, well, depending on how the scheme is structured, a lot of sensitive data in one place, and so on and so forth. That is, I think, the better objection. The other one, though, the historical one, is of course that historically Britain hasn't been the country that needed this kind of thing, and that was to distinguish us from other countries. But sure, 100 years ago, your average Brit could pass their entire lives without really interacting with the state at all, right? But these days, you know, if you want to rent a flat, you need to present an ID and a utility bill, a printed utility bill, not like and all of this. So we've
have another £700 in your back pocket if you want to get it off Russian Hour Alley as well.
Exactly, right? So this is the thing. I think we've ended up in Britain in a very strange position where we have almost created a papers, please society, but then on a point of libertarian principle, we've refused to issue the papers, right? And so you think about the voter ID thing, where you had about 75 forms of ID that could potentially be used at a polling station. The old person's train license, travel pass was legal ID, but the young person's travel card was not legal.
That's right, and veterans' cards as well weren't in the first election as well, which was a farce. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we've ended up with this very confusing position where we need ID for all kinds of things. It's simply not the case these days that if you're a legitimate citizen conducting legitimate business, you can really get around without having lots of forms of ID.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
The gap you have is that if you are an unscrupulous employer or an unscrupulous landlord, or you're someone who's here illegally and trying to work, there is nothing that can be used to police that bit of the system. And so you end up in the worst of all worlds. Law-abiding citizens have to be inconvenienced more than ever, whilst actually the system doesn't impede those who are...
Although the argument would be, of course, that the digital ID would do that to a greater extent, because law-abiding citizens would have another form of ID that they would actually have.
Well, it would replace a lot of the rest.
Yeah, well, that's a fair point too. Yeah, Henry, thank you. That's Henry Hill there, he's Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. Mark has been in touch and says, is Sarah Putin in the right party? Farage can't control 3 MPs. How does anyone on the right mind expect him to run a government? This person says, Starmer and Lamy in Ukraine negotiations with their track record in giving British property away. They'll give Putin the Isle of Wight and 100 billion quid to take it off to take off us. And thank you to everybody who's been in touch on Twitter, and indeed Sam. I'll read that out in just a second because it'll segue nicely into the next item. In the meantime, I will speak to Kevin in Nottingham, who's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000 about digital ID. Kevin, what do you think?
I've got no problem with it. I heard a caller earlier this afternoon, and basically I've never seen an issue with it. The fact is that I go abroad a lot to Europe, and it would make things it's easy over there. I carry my passport with me when I'm walking around in Europe, but in this country I walk around with a wallet, and in that wallet's my driving licence, my bus pass, which both have got photos on. I carry credit cards, debit cards. I have a shopping card. I'll mention the companies, Morrison's and Tesco's, and also Sainsbury's. They know exactly what I'm shopping for, so I don't have an issue.
But my issue, I think it's maybe not an issue, but it's at least a point or a problem. It's more a point of discussion, I suppose, Kevin, is all of those are kind of separate. The driving licence people know that you can drive and you've passed your test, and any endorsements you have in your licence, I'm sure it's a totally clean one, Kevin. Tesco know that you know your huge love of Brussels sprouts or whatever, and then they can send you vouchers about Brussels sprouts. The problem is when you put it all together, when you have it all in one, and they can say, right, actually, your doctor says you've got high cholesterol, you're buying butter, full fat butter with, salted butter or whatever, and we want you to buy less of that, and we're going to try to put a restriction on your liberty in order to do that. That's what worries me, Kevin. It's putting it all together and the state seeing everything.
I don't think it's a problem. I don't think it's an infringement on liberty, personally. Okay. I mentioned to your person when I first found in that the thing is, I have health issues, so I'm on certain medications. If I had an ID that if I collapsed in the street and couldn't speak, and somebody else to look at the ID and say, "Oh, this guy's on so and so, he's got this condition." So
yeah.
I don't know what the issue is. We carry enough things around. I worked in local government, and basically I walked around with an ID hanging around my neck.
Oh, you're part of the Landlord class,
exactly.
Kevin.
Well, you had to. You couldn't do anything. It was one of those things. But
yeah, you need it at all times. I hate wearing a lanyard. I can't stand it. The only time I do it.
I know exactly what you mean. That's why I used to keep mine in my sort of jacket.
Well, I keep it in my pocket as well. The one time you can't get away with it, Kevin, is that if you're at those party political conferences that I go to most years anyway, Labour and Conservatives, especially the Liberal Democrats love a lanyard. You cannot go anywhere without wearing it for security reasons, in case you want to, I don't know, attack Ed Davey or something, which I wouldn't recommend anybody does. Kevin in Nottingham, thank you very much for your thoughts today. And also to Sam, who says, isn't it ironic that Superman landed in the USA illegally, just like the migrants, now he's helping with the ICE raids. We'll talk about why Dean Kaine, who used to be playing Superman alongside Terry Hatcher in Superman Adventures, that he has now joined the immigration enforcement branch of the authorities in the United States. We'll find out more about that in just a second here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, we've had the first images of the UK France Returns pilot in action. The Home Office has released footage showing Border Force and Immigration Enforcement teams enacting the UK-France Returns pilot agreement. This has come into force, of course, yesterday. The first migrants who arrived illegally by small boat were detained under the new one-in, one-out pilot scheme with France. We are told that in the first bit that you can see on screen at the moment, I'll just narrate it for you, the faces are blurred, that after being brought into Western jet foil by border force vessels, the small boats migrants are disembarked, medically assessed and triaged. Upon arrival at Manston, the small boats' arrivals are subject to screening, including security and biometric assessments. We then follow one group of individuals as they receive their documents informing them of their detention under the pilot scheme and being boarded into an escort van. I don't think that's happened just yet. They're looking at their different IDs at the moment. They're waiting around to see what is happening, and they're being interviewed in regard to their status and all of this. Border Force officials there in action there. Of course, the coming across on boats is incredibly visual, so the question is, will they be actually sent away? And if it's one in, one out, how many of those people we've actually seen arrive there in that footage? How will they be actually dealt with? And then they're unloaded from the escort van, taken to an immigration removal centre where they're going to stay until they're returned to France, apparently. It'll be very interesting to see what actually happens here. That's them getting into the van. They're wearing sort of tabards there, kind of high-vis jackets, and then they're unloaded from the escort van, taken to the immigration removal centre where they're going to stay until their return to France. It'll be very interesting to see how many of them actually go back to France. We will, of course, keep tabs on that here at Talk, but that's the Home Office releasing the first footage showing Border Force and immigration enforcement teams enacting this returns pilot agreement. Right then, let's turn to matters international again. Trump could meet Putin as early as next week to discuss the Ukraine ceasefire. Steve Gill is with us. He's a former advisor to the Clinton administration and the Bush administration as well. Steve, you're very welcome to the programme. Do you envisage Trump, Putin and Zelensky in the same room thrashing it out and sorting out Ukraine?
I think you're going to see a Putin-Trump visit, and I think the more they can talk directly, the better. I think it's become apparent when you look at some of these press conferences where whatever staff Trump has are not advising him, whether it's on tariff numbers or what's going on in Russia or in Ukraine. You know, he's being hung out to dry by his staff and frankly being embarrassed. So I think the more he can talk directly with world leaders and not through the filter of his advisors, I think that leads us more likely to a resolution. I don't know that you're going to see Putin, Trump, and Zelensky all in a meeting anytime soon. I think President Trump and President Putin are going to hammer out whatever deal needs to get done, and then they will advise Zelensky of what the deal is.
In regard to the big developments today, I'm sure you've been familiar with what has happened in regard to Israel. What is the American reaction likely to be to Netanyahu saying that he wants to take over all of Gaza?
You know, I think that's been the fear of people who live in Gaza, that they're going to be moved out. And while I've defended President Trump on the construction side, this is a guy that knows the construction business. You can't rebuild buildings while people are still living in the partially destroyed, damaged locations. You got to move them out, but it has to be with the promise that you will be allowed to return to your homes when we rebuild homes. This changes that whole dynamic. But by the same token, Peter, if Hamas wants to end the military actions, release the hostages and the remains, that takes away the bludgeon of public relations that they are not releasing the hostages. If that's taken away, it takes away a lot of the PR ability of Israel to continue the military actions.
I want to talk about the actor Dean Kaine, who has released a video we're about to watch now. He played Superman years ago when I was a kid, actually, and he wants to join the immigration enforcement branch of the government to save America again, just in a different way. Let's see what he's put on Instagram.
Hey everybody, Dean Kaine here. And for those who don't know, I am a sworn law enforcement officer as well as being a filmmaker. I felt it was important to join with our first responders to help secure the safety of all Americans, not just talk about it. So I joined up. So if you want to help save America, ICE is arresting the worst of the worst and removing them from America's streets. I like that. I voted for that. They need your help. We need your help to protect our homeland and our families. So check into it, as I said, and join today if it's something that tickles your fancy, because we can use you.
That's Dean Kaine there. He's currently, I mean, he's been anti-woke in a number of different ways. We saw there was a particularly famous Twitter response where he criticised some trans activists, and he said, you know, you're not really women. And they had said, well, you weren't really Superman. And he just replied and said, yes, I pretended. Which was a supremely brilliant response. I just wonder what you make of this. We heard in the background there the theme music to Lewis and Clark as well there. So he's clearly got one sort of a little bit of an arched eyebrow here, but he's deadly serious about the fact that he wants to become an enforcement officer and help immigration in America.
Well, and they've raised the age limit so that people over age 40 can join ICE. They're paying like
he's 59. He doesn't look it, but he's 59.
No, so he fits. By the way, Superman. I remember the black and white edition, so I'm going to age myself, Peter, before the full color Superman films. It's interesting though, with this Dean Kaine becoming part of ICE reminded me of photographs. I don't remember it myself. Of when President Nixon gave Elvis Presley a drug enforcement badge, and Presley thought that would give him more right to take drugs internationally. but giving that badge to Presley kind of reminds me giving this badge and authority to Dean Kaine.
Goodness me. Well, listen, it's a really, really interesting development anyway. It'll be intriguing to see what happens next. Steve, thank you very much indeed. That's Steve Gill there. He's a former advisor to the Clinton-Bush administrations. Lots to discuss. We'll discuss it with you. Get your call in, 0344 499 1000. We'll take as many calls as I can right up to 7 o'clock when Kevin O'Sullivan takes over. He's here between 7 and 10. And I'm back tomorrow as well, of course, for Talk Drive.
And there are so many cases of people that we have tried to extradite who have made groundless appeals time and time again. And so many activist immigration judges have come down with ridiculous rulings. We all know the chicken nuggets one, and there's a whole litany of other stupid decisions whereby they will not deport people who absolutely should not be here.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I've just been looking at my Twitter there during the break. Lots of people getting in touch, including Fred Jackson. He says, my brother lives in France and he tells me that you can't get anything done without your identity card. I need to be convinced it's a bad idea. Another person says, your guests and callers seem oblivious to the danger of a digital ID system. It is the very real risk of a China-style social credit system. Imagine what controls the government might have imposed on the unvaccinated, brackets me, during COVID-19. Thank you also to Anna, who says, you're totally spot on, Peter, in regard to the digital ID future. It's scary. I don't want them telling me what I can and cannot do. Gary says, who is going to explain to Sarah Pochin that this will lead to full state control and the victimisation of groups or individuals, especially when we no longer have cash, but digital currency, its replacement. And finally, this person says, digital ID is not an ID card. It is an obey the state or else system. The world's governments are implementing it on their countries. That is the thought there. Thank you also to the person who talked about one in, one out, saying this is a clandestine way of getting the migrants into the UK, as the numbers won't be coming by boat, so nobody can tell what's arriving in the open. Do we really trust this or any government now? It's a resounding no, we don't. And Sean says ID cards, passports, driving licences can all be cloned or forged. In fact, most things for identification can be forged. Maybe we should implant a microchip, though they could be copied, so nothing is easy in resolving this issue. No, Sean, no, I'm not implanting a microchip. Not going to happen. Sorry, mate, you're not implanting anything in me, thank you very much. Let's speak to Lottie in Lancashire about digital ID. Lottie, what's your view on this?
Hi Peter, how are you today?
Very well. How are you, Lottie? How are you getting on?
I'm good. No tombola today, I'm afraid.
Right, well that's very disappointing, but next time.
Right, okay. So we moved to, me and my family, we moved to Canada in early 2000s. And when we got there, the first 3 months, we had to pay for everything, health, whatever, everything. And then after 3 months, we got a Saskatchewan health card. And that health card had your picture on it, your number on it, so that
am I right? Sorry to interrupt you, Lottie. Saskatchewan, that's a province in Canada, is that correct?
It is, yeah, it's right in the middle.
Great,
yeah.
Okay.
Right, okay, so we got this Saskatchewan health card. So that health card, you needed that health card if you wanted to get a driving licence. When we first got there, we needed that for internet, electricity, everything to prove that you were who you were. You know, and I didn't have a problem with it. I mean, this health card, it was really good because it didn't matter whereabouts you were in Saskatchewan. You could go to any doctor or any hospital with this card, and they would give you the service that you wanted. But I don't have a problem with it. I do have a problem with it if it goes any further.
Yes.
You know.
But that's the thing. I mean, can we trust it?
Yeah.
You've always got to think, you might trust the government. I'm not sure many of our viewers and listeners really do, but you might trust let's say, the government of Saskatchewan, for example. But are we in a position where the worst case scenario, where the worst bit of this could actually be, I mean, we've got people contacting me today saying, well, this could be used for social credit, the way China does, where you say, right, you do good things that we approve of, therefore we'll allow you to do more things. It's as I said before, I said earlier in the programme, it's the putting together of all the data. That, to me, that's what worries me, the kind of metadata.
It is. It's very, very scary, but I mean, I can't see that being anytime soon.
Yeah, but I don't know. I'm generally distrustful, but nonetheless, I think you got some good points there. Yeah, well, indeed.
I think we all are, but I do think though it would give, say, like anybody just turning up and wanting anything that they wanted to get free.
Yeah.
I mean, in Saskatchewan, if you turned up at a hospital or a doctor's and you didn't have your card, you had to pay, and that was the end of it.
That was the end of it. Really interesting to hear that perspective. Lottie, thanks very much indeed. How long did you live in Canada, by the way?
8 years. We moved to Ontario, and then when we went to Ontario, we got an Ontario health card.
Yeah, indeed. I've been to Toronto. I've been to Ottawa as well. I mean, Canada can be a great country, but I think it's moved in a bad way under the floppy-haired fascist under Justin Trudeau. Although
it's really bad. We've got English friends that are over there at the moment, still over there, and they're like, "Oh, it's really bad."
I actually saw a picture of Mark Carney with us recently, but I saw another picture actually of Justin Trudeau, Lottie, but I didn't recognise him without the blackface. I must say it was hard to pick him out. Yes, Lottie, thank you very much. Good to talk to you. Pete says that dentists can microchip you when they do a filling. No, Pete, I don't want that to happen. Peter in Nottingham has been in touch. Just give me a ring at 0344 499 1000. Peter, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
What it is, I was just going to say, ID cards, there's too much stuff on them. I'm registered blind, so I haven't got a driving licence, obviously, and I haven't got a passport. So basically, I have no ID.
So how do you kind of prove your identity then if you want to buy something, or you're using a service that they say, can you show us a form of ID?
Well, I've got, the only thing with my picture on is disabled a blue badge, but that's out of date anyway. So
oh right, okay.
That wouldn't even count. But what I was going to say, rather than ID card, just a fingerprint, because and then. Instead of like the police computers, if they've got everybody's fingerprint, just pulls up your name, job done.
I mean, it's interesting when you go into America. I've gone into America a couple of times. They take your fingerprints every single time you go in or come out. Actually, is that something you'd feel happy doing, Peter?
Yeah, I'd feel happy doing it, because no one's going to forge that, are they? Because unless they've got hold of your finger, and then someone's going to notice them putting someone else's finger on it.
Yeah, well, let's hope that doesn't happen. Peter, listen, thanks for your thoughts there. I appreciate that. That's Peter in Nottingham there. Tanya has been in touch as well and said any government that decided to bring in digital ID would never bring it in during a 5-year term anyway. Everything we do in this country takes forever to implement. We're still rolling over to universal credit. That was an Ian Duncan Smith idea. And actually, yeah, you're right. I mean, that was Ian Duncan Smith literally, 13 years ago he resigned, I think, as Department of Work and Pensions Secretary when George Osborne cut the feet from under him in regard to what universal credit was meant to be. And once again, it goes back to my theory that basically everything that's wrong with society can be traced back to either George Osborne or Tony Blair. Gary is in Leicestershire and wants to talk about interest rates. Gary, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Pete. Love your show, by the way.
Thank you. That's very kind.
I'll keep it punchy. Yeah, no, it's well deserved. Going to keep it punchy. 5 minutes before you're finished. This interest rate thing. I noticed Twitter's full of Labour. Oh, the fourth reduction. Quick question: how does interest rates influence the man in the street in reality? What's the most important?
Well, mortgages would be the main one. Although loads of people are on fixed rate mortgages, aren't they?
Okay, that's a good point. Do you know how many people are on fixed rate mortgages?
I don't actually.
6.3 million.
Okay.
75% of all mortgages in the UK, according
fixed rate mortgages.
Yeah. I don't know. I knew it'd be high, and I was shocked.
That's a lot, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, I'm on a fixed rate mortgage, and even though I'm on a fixed rate mortgage, I think it's good that it's good for me anyway, that this interest rate has gone down, because I know in a couple of years' time when I'm actually renegotiating and trying to get another mortgage, if it's down, well, that's a good thing. I mean, things might change in the next few years, but it doesn't materially affect me, but I'm happy that it's happened. No. I just wonder how you feel about it, Gary.
Excellent. When did you do your mortgage, Pete?
So I've been in the flat now 4.5 years, I think. So I did the first mortgage 4.5 years ago. Then after 2 years, I changed to another fixed rate one. So I must be about 2.5 years into a 5-year fixed rate.
Okay, that's cool. Well, let's have a look at the people that are having to change their mortgages now. Did it in 2020, yeah?
Yep.
Average 5-year rate in 2020, 2.4.
Ah, okay. Yeah, so still very high.
Okay, average rate for a 5-year mortgage today, pulled off the internet, 4.5.
Yeah.
4.5. Can I just make that into pound notes for you?
Yes, you can.
Being a right misery guts at the end of it.
That's okay, Gary.
So I ain't got a mortgage, so I ain't worried about it that much. That increase on the average mortgage in the UK, which is £193,000 apparently, that's another figure that I pulled up. Yeah, that's an extra £4,053 in interest.
That's a lot of money.
Per year.
Yeah, per year. Yeah.
£337 a month.
Yeah.
Now, these are people, you know...
that don't have £337 a month, yeah.
They've got to find the money, and that means no money to buy, no money to invest, and the economy's going to go up, do you think?
Very, very interesting, Gary. Listen, you've laid that out very, very well. Martin Lewis will be quicking in his boots when he hears you, Gary, laying it all out there. So thank you very, very much indeed. You have a good evening, Gary. Appreciate that. Anna in Surrey says the government currently facilitate the illegals from the Channel onwards and give them free everything. How does having an ID card change that? And Stuart says, Stuart in Bradford here, regarding ID cards, where will the government get the data from? I, for one, will not comply. So if they get it via a third party, that is a GDPR breached. If we all refuse, it'll never actually happen. So Stuart, thank you very much for all your comments there. Really appreciate it. And Kevin O'Sullivan is in the studio with me now. Kevin, what's coming up in your programme?
We're going to kind of a special, really. I'm going to read out at the beginning of the show 50 asylum seeker sex crimes, alleged sex crimes. This is 50 asylum seekers all across the country who've been charged with sex crimes. In every single case, the local community didn't know they were asylum seekers. This is the tip of a rancid iceberg. This is going on all over the country. So I thought it might be powerful to just give everybody the names and where this happened. Loads of these sex offences are on children. This is a real problem. The Telegraph today reporting